It all begins when an elderly man is lying on the ground, bearing marks of a terrible injury. Soon, the blue-haired boy reveals that his grandfather has died. In addition, he continues the story, explaining that his grandfather was defeated in a terrible way. However, he realizes that he cannot even feel any kind of sadness. Seeing his house in flames, the young man questions what kind of person he is for not reacting, since his grandfather was his only family. At that moment, the scene shifts to a memory in which he excitedly shows the spiritual link herb he found. The old man congratulates him for the good work, and the boy says he found the herb on the east side of the valley, as instructed. While the elder evaluates the size of the plant, the boy comments that he saw a den with fox cubs nearby, but not the mother. With a serious expression, the elder directly asks if he killed the cubs. Confused, the young man denies it, explaining that the fox would be sad as she found her young dead. The grandfather then praises his decision and calls him to help prepare things for dinner, with the boy agreeing. Soon after, the old man asks Jang to promise him something. Curious, he asks what it would be. The grandfather then asks his grandson never to reveal to anyone the nature hidden inside him. Back in the present, Jang apologizes to his grandfather with a sinister expression. While picking up the scythe from the ground, he states that he doesn't think he'll be able to keep that promise. Next, he charges forward screaming, with an aura forming around him. Then, the scene moves to the bustling city of Zhonglian County. Inside a cage, several men appear injured and piled up. As the wagon passes by, a citizen comments that all the bandits from the hill have finally been captured. With that, the crowd around begins to boo and shout insults at the prisoners. From a balcony, a curious spectator asks who the man sitting alone in the wagon is. Inside the mobile cell, Jeng is sitting alone with marks of a recent battle. A man in a hat observes the boy and comments on how young he is, looking to be about the same age as his young master. His companion warns him not to underestimate him, as he is probably the worst of the group, which is why he's separated. The observer continues, saying that since he is a martial artist, his friend might have difficulty understanding the situation. Soon, the man turns and asks what the great hero of the martial realm is doing there, and he replies that he needs to find someone. The hero then specifies that he is looking for someone young, whose death would not matter to anyone. At that moment, a stone hits the boy's head while he is still in the wagon. A man in the crowd shouts that the heavens should punish him as he prepares to attack. Another citizen calls him miserable, while the two men on the balcony watch the scene. Faced with the crowd's jeers, the prisoner simply keeps his head down. Suddenly, the man in the hat looks to the side with a surprised expression. With that, the prisoner lifts his face, revealing his features beneath his hair. The man in the hat then turns to his companion and tells him to pretend that request never happened. Ignoring him, Cam goes down the stairs while the other tries to stop him. Soon he walks through the crowd, approaching the wagon, but suddenly he stops, stating that he's found him. He concludes that the young man in the cage is the perfect person for the task. The scene shifts to the prison of Zhonglian County's castle at night. Soon, guards stand in front of the cell where the boy remains silently imprisoned. Alone in the cell, he admits to himself that he was far too impatient. Then he recalls a man ironically asking if that wasn't impressive. The same man goes on, saying that he wondered who would come, but didn't expect a brat without any martial arts knowledge. In his thoughts, that man was actually a monster. He remembers how he was completely overpowered by his grandfather's attacker, knowing the result would be the same if he fought again. With that, he realizes that no matter how hard he tries, he cannot find a way to defeat him. The phrase about not having martial arts knowledge echoes in his mind. He then wonders if, by learning martial arts, he might be able to win. Right after, he realizes that in his current situation, he has no opportunity left. Suddenly, smoke begins to rise from the floor of the cell. He questions that smell, but quickly recognizes it thanks to the years spent with his grandfather dealing with herbs. Without a doubt, he identifies the scent of lizard tail and dankwai. While also recognizing the aroma of heliotrope, one of the guards outside begins to feel unwell. The man then collapses, recognizing the mixture as a silence herb. Soon, he realizes that a sleeping gas has spread throughout the prison. A man in a hat stops right in front of the cell, where the young man lies collapsed. With that, he extends his hand toward him to grab him. The intruder approaches but notices something strange about the prisoner's breathing. Suddenly, he realizes in shock that the boy had been awake the entire time. Without hesitation, the boy attacks him with a direct kick to the chest. With that, he runs off, fleeing the place. Even without fully understanding, he realizes this is his chance, since he only endured because the gas mixture was weak. But the man is faster and strikes several points on his body with precise touches. He then reveals that he has pressed his paralysis meridian, preventing him from moving. Completely immobilized, he wonders how the other appeared behind him, questioning if that could be martial arts. Soon, the man strikes him, throwing him against the wall. As he falls to the floor, he wonders if that man is a martial artist and if he is the same one who attacked him before. He quickly dismisses the idea upon noticing that, despite the similarity, the other man had a scar on his eye. At that moment, a figure covered by a veil approaches and asks Cam if that is the boy they were looking for. Cam scolds him for coming in, but the young master replies that he just wanted to see what a prison was like, finding the place disappointing. The young master then orders them to sit the boy up so he can see him better and to bring him a chair. With that, Cam lifts him by the hair, forcing him to sit. Lifting his veil, the young man reveals his face and comments that the resemblance between them is real. He then speaks of the fateful encounter of finding someone so similar to him in that situation. Meanwhile, the prisoner remains silent, unable to react. Seated, the young master comments that he heard the condemned is set to die in 2 days. Even without understanding, the boy confirms that the information is correct. He then laments the other's miserable life, reflecting that despite having the same face, their fates were opposite. Next, he states that for someone as wretched as him, he will give a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He then reveals that the proposal is a chance to become the double of Mak Gyungwon, the third young master. The boy repeats the word opportunity to himself, surprised by the proposal. With a smile, Mak Gyungwon explains that the task will not be difficult and that he will simply need to enjoy the things he's never had. Cam adds that when the job is done, he will be well paid and allowed to leave freely. Then the guard offers him a pill, telling him to take it if he is interested. Suspicious, he asks if it is poison, and Cam replies that they wouldn't trust the word of a condemned man. He then explains that the antidote will only be given when the task is complete, and asks what his decision will be. Thinking of his grandfather, the young man realizes this is his second chance. Determined, he accepts the pill and swallows it. Meanwhile, Mak Gyungwon and the guards simply watch in silence. For the prisoner, however, this is the chance to take revenge on the wretch who defeated him. With a determined look, he finally asks if they will give him that opportunity. The young master then smiles, stating that it was an excellent choice. Satisfied, he orders Cam to release the chains and unblock the boy's meridians. Soon, the guard touches him to release the paralysis and the locks on his hands finally come off. Completely free, he stands up and breathes in relief. Then Cam offers to lead the way, asking the young master to follow. Beside the boy, Mak Gyungwon orders him to walk in front of him. As soon as he opens the door, the guard announces that they have exited and asks them to follow carefully. But suddenly, he grabs the young master's face. The guard turns completely shocked, not understanding what happened. With that, the attack happens and the boy slams him forcefully to the ground. With a false look of surprise, he then asks Cam what they should do now. With a sinister smile, he concludes that it seems the double is dead. The story shifts back to a moment before the arrest of the Scythe Phantom, where a burning building echoed with screams. There the boy was dragging someone by the hair toward the flames, claiming that it was fun. While people ran and a man cried for help, he repeated that it was fun. He recounts that, in search of revenge for his grandfather's death, he eliminated everyone who seemed to have any connection to the case. With that, he realizes that the emotion he felt while defeating dozens of people was, clearly, enjoyment. The memory of his grandfather's promise returns, asking him never to reveal his nature to anyone. The boy then reflects on the meaning of that nature. Suddenly, he releases his body and thinks about the place where people were dying. Looking at his hand with the marks of battle, he wonders what expression he is making at that moment. Soon, he questions whether he is smiling. He then asks himself if this could be the nature his grandfather spoke of. As the guard calls him the Reaper's ghost, he questions whether evil is his true nature. Unable to find an answer, he decides that the best course of action is to attack first. But before he could act, he is struck by a powerful kick. As a guard runs away screaming in the background, the man observes the boy lying on the ground. With a surprised look, he comments that the boy is incredible for still being alive. Still recovering, the young man realizes that this guy is different. He then concludes that the man in front of him is dangerous. The attacker remembers how, during their first encounter, the boy seemed not to have learned martial arts. He continues to be surprised that the young man managed to withstand his blow. In the blink of an eye, the enemy lunges forward and grips the victim's neck tightly. The young man is shocked by his speed, questioning whether that man is even human. The scene flashes back to their first encounter, where the man reveals that he did not expect to be confronted by a boy without martial arts. Upon hearing that, he understands the situation and is attacked with a weapon, while the other asks if he is responsible. The boy's scream echoes with the severe injury he has just suffered. The man then comments that it is impressive for someone to withstand his blow even without knowing martial arts. With that, he decides that eliminating the opponent now will reduce his worries in the future. He then laments that the boy did not live quietly, digging his own grave by acting with such confidence. The young man reflects on how he was absurdly defeated precisely by the target he finally found. As he lost consciousness, he wondered if he would die this way, but the boy did not die. Instead, he became a prisoner on death row. He then thinks that if he were given another chance now, he would not let this opportunity slip away. Back in the present, the prisoner firmly grabbed the young master. With that, he threw him forcefully against the ground. With an ironic smile, the prisoner asks Cam what they should do. Soon after, he states that it seems the doppelganger is dead. The guard then calls him a bastard and lunges to attack him. He accuses him of being insane for daring to attack the young master, questioning whether he wishes to die. Jen responds by asking if it wouldn't be the opposite, since being a doppelganger means taking on the dangers of the original. Moreover, he explains that following them without resistance would be the true desire to die. Cam is shocked to have his arm stopped, wondering what kind of strength that is. The other provokes him, stating that he didn't kill him earlier because he had no affection for his master. The guard screams that this is absurd and throws him forcefully over his shoulder. With that, the impact violently slams the boy against the wooden floor. Without hesitation, the man draws his dagger, ready for a new attack. With the weapon aimed at the target, he declares that he will die right there. Even while down, the young man calmly asks if there is really a need to kill him. Irritated by the question, Cam asks why there wouldn't be. The boy then reveals that he took the poison pill and needs the antidote, having no choice but to follow his orders. He continues, asking if it isn't a great opportunity to have the third young master as his guard dog. The man summarizes the proposal, questioning whether he should betray his master and use his assassin as a puppet. The other remains silent while the guard processes the situation. Soon, Cam lets out a sigh of disdain, making his decision. He then raises the dagger, ready to deliver the final blow. The scene pulls away, showing the prison under the night sky. Inside, the attack is completed against the person lying on the ground. The dagger was embedded in the ground, right next to the victim's neck. Standing, the man begins to say that from now on, he is Ma Kyung-woon. Meanwhile, the smile on his face becomes even more evident. The scene shifts to the Hall of the Ordered Wooden Sword, where the speech continues. Cam warns him, stating that there will never be a day when he needs to encounter people from the Hall of the Ordered Wooden Sword. He then warns him that, having volunteered as a puppet, he should have no doubts, and that if he is caught, there will be no antidote. Soon after, the guard adds another condition. He threatens him, saying that if he disobeys orders or tries any tricks, he will eliminate him immediately. With a blink of an eye, the prisoner simply responds that he understands. Cam then hands him the neutralizing pill, explaining that without it, the poison will spread through his body in 24 hours. As he takes the medicine, he reflects that he was lucky. He thinks it was a miracle to survive the injuries, and that now, even though condemned, he has gained a new chance. While looking at the sky, the boy wonders if his grandfather is telling him not to go yet, but reassures himself, saying he won't leave before avenging him. He then reflects on his revenge, imagining that the man in the hat must already think he is dead, as Ma Kyung-woon's surprise attack would have already been discovered. He remembers that this place is a Murim clan that teaches martial arts, and decides that he will act as the third son to be able to train. The memory of the terrible scene of his grandfather's death comes back to his mind clearly. With a sinister smile, he promises that he will do exactly the same to the culprit as they did to his grandfather. The scene shifts to a large and imposing clan property. Inside, the young man reflects on how he miraculously managed to survive, and also on the opportunity he gained to learn martial arts at the Wooden Sword Hall. Even so, he admits that there is a catch in this whole situation. The boy gets irritated with the constant surveillance left behind by Escort Cam. Outside, Go-chan, a junior of Escort Cam, is on guard. The man remains silent with a clear expression of disdain. Soon, he questions what is so special about a boy who doesn't even know how to fight. Suddenly, a voice informs that the boy killed Ma Kyung-won, leaving Go-chan completely shocked by the news. His superior abruptly silences him, saying that his voice is too loud and that his task hasn't changed. He then orders the subordinate to continue watching the target as planned while preparing another plan. Soon after, the man reveals that they intend to abandon Jen, and that, instead of him, they will start following someone else. Upon hearing that the new target is Senior Cam, Go-chan questions him about the poison pill the boy took. The superior clarifies that although the boy is easy to control, the plan has changed and their target is no longer him. The superior explains that Zhang is not the type to obey orders, as he thought about killing to take the place of another prisoner. With that, he concludes that the boy is too dangerous and nothing good will come from getting involved with him for too long. Even reluctantly, he mutters that he needs to follow orders, although he doesn't understand what is so special about the boy. Meanwhile, back in the room, the prisoner continues eating in silence. He reflects on how Escort Cam did not explain the reason for needing a double, leaving only one guard to watch him. From what he perceived, he thinks the place is too safe to justify the need for a double. This means they need a substitute for another purpose. With a slight smile, he wonders if they plan to remain silent when the time comes to use him. Soon, with a sinister look, he realizes that they intend to switch who they are following. Outside, Go-chan continues his watch in the corridor. In the next moment, the door opens and the boy appears, completely surprising him. Confused, the man asks if he needs to go to the bathroom, but the other invites him to come out, saying he has a question. With an impatient gesture, Go-chan tells the boy to go back inside if he doesn't want to see unpleasant things. With a smile, he confirms that the guard's name is Go-chan and says that nothing would happen if they stayed quiet. In response, the guard grabs him back by the collar. The man warns him for forgetting his place and orders him to return to the room to avoid problems. Instead of obeying, he simply observes and states that the man is weaker than escort Cam. Surprised, the other barely has time to react before having his wrist firmly grabbed by the boy. In a swift motion, the attacker throws him over his shoulder, knocking him to the ground. With no chance of defense, the guard is immediately pinned to the floor with one of his arms trapped. Then he presses specific points on the back of the fallen man. Unable to move, the guard panics upon realizing that this is a meridian paralysis technique. Not understanding what is happening, he wonders if Zhang had been hiding his martial arts all along. The young man complains that the other is still moving and says he only imitated what escort Cam did, but it didn't work as expected. Shocked, the opponent realizes that the technique was replicated almost perfectly after seeing it just once. Suddenly, he panics upon feeling something strange and realizing it could be poison. As he tries to use his energy to expel the substance, the boy reveals that he has been consuming poisons his whole life with his grandfather. With a strike to the opponent's arm, he finishes his explanation by revealing that one day his own blood became poisonous. With a smile, he explains that he can identify ingredients just by smell or taste, which makes him immune to most poisons. Soon he reveals that, in fact, he never needed the antidote they gave him. The young man then demands to know the current situation of the hall, reminding the guard that only his blood can heal him. Completely terrified, Go-chan can only stammer that he is a demon. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the main building of the Wooden Sword Hall. Inside, in the Master's Tower, a doctor observes the hall master, Mok Indan, lying in his bed. Beside him, Dr. Hell laments, asking if there really is no other way. He regrets that, despite all his knowledge in herbs, he cannot even discover the cause of the illness. With a sigh, the doctor wonders why the master did not choose a successor before this happened. It is explained that, by not having appointed a successor, the hall now lives in the calm before the storm. The doctor then wonders what Mrs. Seok, who values her eldest son, will do to put him in power. Suddenly, Mrs. Seok herself appears in the room and asks how the hall master is doing. Dr. Han nervously greets her, but she ignores him and repeats the question about her husband's condition. The doctor apologizes, admitting that his skills are insufficient and that the cause can only be mystical, to which the woman responds that she expected as much. With that, she concludes that the only option left is alchemy, leaving the doctor completely shocked by the idea. Immediately he protests, saying that alchemy is nothing more than a bizarre superstition and a baseless trick. Irritated, the lady questions whether he prefers that she just sits and waits for her husband to die. She then dismisses him, revealing that she has already called an alchemist to deal with the problem. Next, she declares that they will use alchemy to cure the illness and forbids anyone from entering the building where the master rests. With an intense look, she reinforces that absolutely no one will be allowed in. Back in the hallway, Go-chan finishes explaining the current situation of the hall to Zheng. After hearing the account, the young man simply comments that he now understands what is happening. Soon he stands up and invites the guard to leave, who fearfully asks where they are going. With a confident smile, he reveals that they are going to meet the hall master. As they walk through the courtyard, Zheng begins to recap the situation. Thus, he concludes that the original plan was to use him as a decoy to incite a fight between the first and second sons, which Go-chan nervously confirms. Then he looks at the paper with the drawing of the decoy, commenting that it was the best plan they had. The document describes the first son, Mok Yeon-ho, as an incompetent, greedy, and cruel man. On the other hand, the second son, Mok Yeon-pyung, is presented as shrewd and perceptive, just like the first wife. The idea was that, after the second son was provoked and attacked the decoy, the firstborn would eliminate him in a fight. This was the so-called strategy of fishing in troubled waters. In this way, the survivor would be disqualified, and Mok Young-woon would appear to take power unopposed. Zheng admits that it wasn't a bad plan, until he himself eliminated Mok Young-woon and ruined everything. In light of this, Go-chan asks why they are heading toward the hall master, and the other explains that his life is tied to the master's, so he must at least try to find him. The guard panics, worried about what escort Cam would do if he found out. With a threatening smile, Zheng says he didn't imagine his companion would keep a secret from his superior, leaving him terrified. The scene then shifts to Mrs. Seok, who is outside one of the hall's buildings. She watches the long courtyard, patiently waiting for someone. Soon, the old man Mio Sin asks if he will finally be able to meet the hall master. Mrs. Siak tells the Taoist master that she will believe him just this once, as they say he is quite mystical. Grateful, he asks her to send everyone away from the main building, and she replies that she has already done so. With that, Master Mio-sin informs her that she will also need to leave the location. Before leaving, the woman reminds him of her request, and he confirms that he hasn't forgotten. The true quest of the Taoist master is for the seal and the secret martial arts book of the Master of the Hall. In exchange, she promises a reward of 300 silver coins as soon as he finds the items. Mrs. Siak then orders her servants to leave the place and only return when she calls for them. As she walks away, she admits to herself that she did not want to trust a Taoist spell. Suddenly, she is surprised to see someone training in a nearby courtyard. The fourth young master, Mak Yu-chien, son of a concubine, is revealed. Furious, the woman says she cannot forgive her husband for considering passing his position to someone of that bloodline. At that moment, Go Chan and Zheng appear and comment that it seems there is someone there. Soon, the guard recognizes the young man training and informs that it is the fourth young master practicing his martial arts. Finally, he explains that despite his excellent skill, Mak Yu-chien never relaxes in his training and is the master's most beloved son. Curious, Zheng asks if this is how one trains, and the guard explains that the horse stance strengthens the body's foundation. After understanding, the boy catches Go Chan's attention to ask a question. With a cold look, he directly questions whether learning martial arts would allow him to kill him, shocking the guard. Seeing the man's reaction, he repeats the question about being able to kill him if he learned to fight. The guard panics, wondering how the boy discovered the plan to abandon him and realizing he is more cunning than he expected. Still, he tries to compose himself to answer the question. Go Chan explains that internal body training is a foundation of martial arts, awakening Zheng's curiosity. He then clarifies that this training is about breathing to circulate the energy of nature through the body and accumulate Kai. The guard warns that accumulating Ki takes time, and it would be difficult to defeat someone like Escort Cam, who has accumulated energy for a full cycle. With that, Zheng concludes that it would be difficult in the short term, and Go Chan confirms. However, with a mocking smile, the man corrects him, saying that for him, it would be impossible. He explains that there is an age limit for training, as those who do not start between the ages of 5 and 9 accumulate impure Ki. In other words, it would be impossible for Zheng to accumulate Ki and become stronger. Satisfied, the guard tells him to fight as much as he wants, as at best, he will remain just a frog in a well. Suddenly, Zheng stares at the man with an intensity that leaves him completely frightened. In a threatening tone, he comments that the guard's eyes are rolling well, and that it makes him want to rip them out. Then, with a smile, he invites Escort Go Chan to become his subordinate. After a moment of silence, the guard agrees to the proposal and follows him. As they walk, Zheng wonders if it would really be impossible to defeat Escort Cam, since it would be difficult to bring him to his side. The guard then advises him to leave that place, and the boy immediately asks why. Go Chan explains that the young master does not like him at all, making Zheng want to know if something happened. He reveals that 2 years ago, the true master insulted the boy's mother, who was almost seriously injured because of it. Finding the situation amusing, Zheng comments that the youngest son is a nice kid for having left him alive and with all his limbs intact. In a hurry, the guard insists that they leave quickly before something bad happens, and the other agrees to depart. Meanwhile, Mak Yu-chien continues his training, completely focused. As night begins to fall, the scene shifts to the imposing tower of the Master of the Hall. Inside the room, red threads are tied to a set of coins. It is soon revealed that the threads are tied to the Master's body, while the Taoist Master performs a ritual beside the bed. With his body covered in strange dark marks, the Master of the Hall remains in a state of agony. Still, the Taoist Master concludes that, although it seems like poison, it is like death itself, and only the strength of a martial artist has kept him alive until now. He then reveals that since the condition has persisted for a long time, the Master has only a 50% chance of survival. Even so, he reflects that he does not care whether he lives or dies, as he only needs to fulfill the task for which he was hired. While drawing the symbol on paper, he begins to chant for all evil spirits to perish. He then throws the talisman, asking the sacred stars to give him energy to suffocate the demons. The paper lands on the sick man's chest, who writhes as energy begins to emanate from the symbol. Concentrated on the ritual, the man commands the brave spirits to advance. While the Master of the Hall suffers through the ritual, the Taoist himself seems to struggle to control the energy. Suddenly, he is startled to realize that the death energy in the other's body is too strong for the ritual. In a last-ditch effort, he decides to use all his power at once, prophesying the end of the ritual to purge the demons. With shining eyes, the Master of the Hall lets out a scream of agony as the ritual forces him to submit to the spirit. Suddenly, the Taoist Master is alarmed to hear a noise at the door and see one of the threads snap. Irritated, he asks who is there, fearing that an interruption in the middle of the ritual will ruin everything. At that moment, the energy of the ceremony spirals out of control and the remaining threads snap, throwing him backward. He then bumps into Zheng and Go-chan, who is startled by the scene and asks what is happening. As the guard recognizes the master lying down, Zheng calmly asks if that person is the master of the hall. Soon after, the boy makes a formal bow and greets the figure in the bed. With a smile, he approaches and repeats the greeting, addressing the master of the hall as his father. Suddenly, someone shouts for everyone to get out of there. The Taoist master then reprimands him, saying it doesn't matter if he is the son, he must leave immediately, but Go-chan questions who he is to expel him. Soon, Dr. Hay shouts that the efforts to control the disease have been reversed due to the killing energy, which will worsen the master's condition. With that, the Taoist pleads for them to leave, warning that things could go very wrong. Immediately, the two turn toward the bed, apprehensive about what might happen. At that moment, the master's body begins to convulse, while a dark aura emanates from him. As Zheng watches, it becomes clear that the mysterious disease is acting on the other's body. Then the body of the master of the hall floats in the air, held by the red threads of the ritual. Urgently, the priest orders Zheng and Go-chan to help him hold the body so that the threads do not snap. As they hold him, he declares that this talisman will dominate the evil spirit and swallow all the malice. As soon as he applies the talisman to the sick man's forehead, his body reacts with a scream. Suddenly, the master tightly grips Go-chan's wrist, who was trying to restrain him. With a quick movement, he twists the guard's arm and snaps one of the red threads. With his arm twisted, Go-chan screams desperately in pain. The Taoist then warns that the master has become even stronger than before. He then alerts Go-chan not to let go, as he will be in danger if the evil spirit passes into him. The man panics upon seeing the marks spreading across his arm and questions why he was not warned of the risk. Desperate, he screams that the disease is approaching his body. Without warning, Zheng appears behind him with a blade in hand. In a swift motion, he uses the weapon to sever the master's arm from his body. The sudden act leaves everyone shocked and marked by what has happened. Terrified, Go-chan asks what Zheng just did. In response, the boy simply opens a disturbing smile on his face. Frightened, Go-chan pleads for him to stop, asking if he will do that again. Ignoring the plea, Zheng advances and removes the other arm of the master with the same coldness. The guard can hardly believe that the boy just severed the arms of the master of the hall. Soon, the priest approaches the fallen limbs and applies the talisman to them. While Go-chan tries to tend to the sick man's wounds, the Taoist master merely observes the chaos in the room. He then thinks that he has failed and needs to flee before taking the blame, deciding to do the bare minimum and leave. However, a blade is suddenly pointed at his neck. With the weapon in hand, Zheng questions him about the meaning of this. As Go-chan reacts in surprise, the boy silences him with a simple gesture. He then asks if he is the reason the master was not well, but the Taoist replies that the disease is consuming him and that he may die. The Taoist master then shouts that there is no time for this and asks if Zheng also wants the master to die. The word also catches the boy's attention, making the other realize his mistake. With a cold smile, Zheng asks who else wanted the master of the hall to die. He continues, questioning if it was the person who hired him, but the man insists it is a misunderstanding. Soon, Zheng warns that his blade is even closer, and that honesty is the only option if he wants to live. Pressured, the Taoist master reveals that the First Lady said it was unnecessary to spare the master's life. He adds, explaining that she ordered him to use the evil spirit to find the secret manual and the master's seal. Shocked, Go-chan realizes that, without them there, the first son would have already become the successor. Urgently, he turns to Zheng and pleads for them to save the master of the hall. To conclude, he warns that they need to prevent the first son's succession, or the First Lady will try to kill Zheng. The boy agrees that it makes sense, as he interrupted her plans, while the Taoist begs him to let him save the master. To the man's surprise, Zheng interrupts him and says not to save the master, but to do something else instead. With a smile, he orders him to find the location of the secret manual and the seal. The unexpected order leaves both Go-chan and the Taoist master in shock. The guard tries to warn about the danger, but Zheng just urges him on, and he agrees even though he thinks the boy has gone mad. Soon after, the Taoist master sits on the ground and prepares to begin the ritual with the removed members. He then shows a small wooden doll with a talisman and asks what it is. Zheng explains that it is a vessel to deceive the evil spirit, as another direct contact would be fatal for the master. Thus, the man announces that he will begin and starts a chant about the great calamities of earth and sky. He continues the ritual to move the spirit, invoking the wisdoms that neither gods nor demons can harm. Then he shouts for the effects of the ritual to manifest quickly. At that very moment, the master of the hall reacts with an agonizing scream in his bed. Even feeling the pressure of the ritual, the Taoist continues the chant for the wisdoms to manifest. He realizes that the energy is too strong, Fearing that forcing the ritual could release the spirit, the master understands that there is no way for Zheng to hear him and desperately wonders what he should do. Suddenly, the man seems to have an idea. Then the Taoist warns that he will restrict the spirit but questions whether Go Chan should be there. The guard agrees that it would be strange to hear and says he will step out for a moment. As soon as the door closes, the Taoist master announces that he will finally begin. He repeats the ritual chant, and the master of the hall writhes in agony on the bed. Soon, a voice emerges from the master's body, asking who is calling him. The priest declares that it is done and orders the spirit to respond, but the voice questions what he means. Urgently, he demands to know where the secret manual and the master's seal are. With difficulty, the voice responds that they are in the underground of the medicinal hall, through the stone door. To confirm, the Taoist repeats the location, questioning if it is in an underground chamber beneath the medicinal hall. Suddenly, the doll used in the ritual begins to crack, overloaded with energy. Desperate, the master shouts for the young master to cut the thread immediately. He then explains that the evil spirit is trying to take over the body of the master of the hall and asks him to hurry. Without hesitation, Zheng uses his blade and cuts the thread that connected the energy to the master. To the boy's surprise, the hands grip tightly onto his legs, immobilizing him in place. Then the hands begin to rise up his body, reaching his shoulder. As they continue to advance, the Taoist master merely observes the scene with a strange expression. With that, the hands completely cover Zheng's face, leaving him dominated by the energy. The Taoist master then reveals that it was an evil spirit from the beginning, boiling with a strong murderous intent. He continues, stating that it was only a matter of time before the spirit broke free, and that it was fortunate it had been transferred to the boy. Thus, he concludes his mission by getting rid of the obstacle, placing a talisman on Zheng's forehead and blaming him for everything. Within the boy's mind, an angry voice questions how he dares. Soon, the evil spirit reveals its rage at having been deceived with a doll and vows that it will not forgive him. Then, the entity stares at Zheng's spiritual form and identifies him as the culprit, thinking it good that he is young. The voice then declares that it will take his body instead of the old man's, leaving him trapped forever in his own mind. Suddenly, Zheng finds himself in a lit forest, wearing peasant clothes. Confused, he wonders if that place is not the well he always visits. The boy observes the peaceful mountain, recognizing the song of a bird. He asserts that he knows that place well, with its familiar waterfall and stream. Then he reinforces that since it is a place he always visits, he knows it well. He then approaches the water and says he wouldn't forget the place even if he wanted to. However, as he walks along the trail, he notices that something feels strange that day and questions that feeling. Soon, he comments that it's as if he is forgetting something important. Suddenly, he spots a thick smoke rising in the distance and is startled. In shock, he realizes that the fire is headed towards his house. As he runs, he desperately repeats a silent plea. The boy continues to run as fast as he can, begging for nothing to have happened. Crossing the forest, he keeps calling for his grandfather. Suddenly, he stops upon seeing something terrible ahead. Upon spotting his grandfather's fallen body, he runs towards him, shouting his name. Holding the gravely injured man, Zheng pleads for him to wake up. In shock, he wonders who could have done such a thing. At that moment, he finally understands what his grandfather meant in his life. With the old man's body in his arms, he realizes how important that person was to him. In front of the burning house, a sinister voice says that this is exactly what it expected. Observing the boy's pain, the evil spirit understands that this is what he desires most. With a gesture, the entity sends its energy into Zheng's back. Suddenly, a voice calls him from afar, asking what he is doing. Turning around, he sees his grandfather, who questions whether he will not help him. With a serious expression, the elder commands his grandson to pull himself together. Not understanding, Zheng asks his grandfather what is happening. His eyes then shine with a dark energy, showing the spirit's influence. In a surge of emotion, he runs and hugs the old man tightly. The man complains that he will fall and asks why he is acting this way, but the boy says it is just because it is him. Embraced by his grandfather, he thinks that he will not lose him again, as he is the reason someone who should have died still lies. While the elder wonders what has come over him, the evil spirit watches the scene and laughs. The entity then confirms that this is exactly what it wanted to see. It then speaks of the cherished past, the precious memories, and the endless happiness. Within the illusion, Zheng asks why he was named with the character for righteousness, while the spirit's voice orders him to stay with his grandfather forever. The voice continues, saying that it did this so he would never lose again. However, the boy turns his face with a resolute expression. In a surprising move, he grabs the entity's face tightly. He then says that, thanks to the spirit, he ended up remembering something unpleasant, while the creature wonders how it is possible for the boy to see it. With his hand gripping the creature's face, he asserts that it is very annoying for it to toy with his deceased grandfather. Soon after, he comments that the spirit seems to have misunderstood something. He then questions whether its desire is happiness or revenge, saying that instead of bringing his grandfather back, the spirit should have shown something better. With a terrifying look, He screams that the entity should have let him tear apart the bastard who killed his grandfather. The spirit realizes, terrified, that something is deeply infiltrating its consciousness. It then recognizes a dangerous primitive desire, a murderous intent so pure that even a spirit of the dead would avoid it. The creature wonders how it is possible for a living being to possess such a nature. Even so, it realizes that something is containing that intent, while the memory of the grandfather asks Jen why he gave him that name. The elder explains that although he was different, he wished for him to grow up to be kind and just, which is why he chose the character for righteousness for his name. To conclude, he says he hoped he would grow up to be a just person, without straying from the path, just like the meaning of the name. The grandfather's voice concludes, saying that he prays he continues to grow as a just person. Feeling the pressure, the evil spirit decides that it needs to escape at all costs. Frightened, the spirit considers him mad and plans to flee to the depths of his consciousness. The entity then realizes that since it has already entered his body, it just needs to dive deeper into his mind. The scene transforms into a vast flower-filled field under a blue sky. The spirit wonders if that field is truly the deepest place in Zheng's consciousness. Soon, its attention is drawn to a large door that stands out in the landscape. It then notices a seal on the door and speculates whether the boy's memories are sealed there. Not caring about the reason, it decides that it just needs to open the door to take control of his consciousness. It believes that as long as it can do that, its goal will be achieved. However, before it can touch the doorknob, it realizes that something is wrong. Suddenly, dark energy tentacles begin to emerge from the ground and wrap around his feet. In panic, the creature realizes that the boy is actually reversing the process and taking control of it. Terrified, the spirit screams for it to stop, for if it continues, it will be devoured. Then, its small form falls into immense darkness. Immediately, the boy opens his eyes, returning to reality. The Taoist master is in shock as the dark energy still envelops Zheng's body. He can hardly believe what he sees, exclaiming that this is impossible. Slowly, the young man rises and tears the talisman from his forehead. The last remnants of the dark energy are then absorbed by his body. With a cold and serene look, he fully composes himself. The Taoist merely observes the scene, not understanding what has happened. Faced with a new apparition, Zheng coldly identifies it as the demonic monk. Meanwhile, Zhang Myondin lets out a long sigh. He remembers Master Mok Indan, whom he saw as a true hero incapable of error. At that time, he was a famous martial artist, and after fighting together against pirates, he swore loyalty to the master. Contemplating the tower, he wonders how the clan's situation could have come to this point. In a memory, Mrs. Sia questions him if he truly believes that a child from humble origins is suitable to lead the clan. According to her, for the future of the Sword Hall, he must step back while the shaman searches for the seal and the secret manual. Although he allowed the action for peace, he suspects that the shaman is a fraud who will use some kind of remedy to threaten the master. With renewed determination, he decides that he cannot simply leave the situation as it is. Even knowing that this goes against his oath, he chooses to just take a quick look and return. Back in the room, the Taoist master realizes in shock that this is not an ordinary vengeful spirit. In fact, he identifies it as a high-class evil spirit. Zheng then turns to the entity, calling it the demonic monk. Soon after, he gives a direct order for the creature to eliminate the shaman. Desperate, the Taoist tries to command his own spirit to confront it. However, the demonic entity attacks him and repels him with overwhelming force. At that moment, the monk realizes that this is not possible, as he is facing a powerful vengeful spirit. Confused, the man wonders how an entity of pure evil can be obeying someone. Without warning, the spirit's hand grips his face firmly. The creature then releases its energy directly onto him. With the impact, he recoils, groaning in pain. In slow steps, the monk approaches with a sadistic smile on his face. Completely terrified, the master screams no as he tries to back away. He pleads for the creature not to come any closer. Faced with its immense form, he confronts terror up close. Fallen on the ground, the man begs for his life, promising to obey. Coldly, Zheng states that he needs nothing, while the victim tries to apologize for deceiving him. Smiling, he corrects the man, saying that it is not about that. Soon after, he questions him if he has not already discovered the location of the seal and the secret manual. Faced with the entity and the hands that grip him, the Taoist master finally understands that the plan was to kill him from the beginning. He can only feel terror as the hands cover his face. Then Zheng turns to the door and allows Go-chan to enter. As soon as he enters, the man asks if it is over and reacts in shock at the scene. Beside him, the body of the Taoist master lies on the ground with the marks of the terrible battle. While Go-chan asks if he is dead, Zheng interrupts him and orders him to carry the body, leaving the man speechless. Impatient, he grabs a sword and says he will do it his way. With a single blow, he begins to destroy the furniture and objects in the room. Next, he invents the story that the shaman went mad, attacked the master of the hall, and that they arrived in time to stop him. Go-chan merely observes the scene, trembling and unsure of what to say. Surprised, the man asks if he plans to hide the truth, and the other confirms without hesitation if there is any problem with that. The subordinate argues that Mrs. Seok does not easily get fooled, and a poorly made excuse will only attract suspicion to the young master. Jang asks if it was that obvious, and the other explains that even if it were true, the lady who hired him would never accept that story. He reflects for a moment and agrees that he needs to make the story a bit more incredible. With a sinister smile, he severely injures his leg and declares that the shaman attacked the master and tried to kill his son. Completely shocked by the attitude, Go-chan can only scream, "What?" The sword falls to the ground marked by the blow, while Zhang asks what he thinks. Next, he shows his injured hand and asks if the story is a bit more convincing now. The other offers to stop the bleeding, but the proposal is declined, with the justification that it will be easier to convince them if he is pale. Just at that moment, the master of the inner hall appears at the entrance of the room, catching both by surprise. Go-chan stammers in surprise upon recognizing the newcomer, who also reacts in shock at the scene. The master's gaze fixes on the bed, with the bedridden leader and the fallen priest beside it. Completely furious, he confronts them and demands to know what they have done. Terrified, Go-chan screams, insisting that this is a misunderstanding. With a pale face, Jang intervenes and suggests that first of all, he should look at the state of the master of the hall. Then he simply collapses to the floor, shocking both men. The master of the inner hall demands to know what happened and why the third young master is there, while Go-chan tries to stammer a response. At that moment, he observes the fallen companion on the floor and notices something strange. He sees that the young man is smiling and wonders if this has all been an act. The scene then shifts to the medicinal hall of the clan. Inside, the place is filled with herbs and medicine cabinets. In one of the rooms, Jeng lies on a bed and comments on how the smell of medicine makes him feel good. He recalls the information he obtained about the basement and the stone doors, considering himself lucky to be in the right place. Watching the activity, he decides that he will look for the secret manual and the seal during the night. Soon, Go-chan arrives and announces himself, but the young man merely complains that he is late. He then hands over 2 books that belong to the shaman, but Jung questions whether those were the only ones. Go-chan explains that he barely managed to grab the 2 before they were burned, leaving the young man surprised by the news. Moreover, he reveals that they are burning all the shaman's items, probably to get rid of the evidence. As he flips through the books, Jung laments that these are the only remaining ones. Despite everything, he praises his companion for the good work, leaving the man visibly surprised. Noticing the reaction, Jung asks what it was, but Go-chan changes the subject, wanting to know why he is reading those books. Ignoring the question, the young man simply points and asks what the other can see outside the window. Confused, the man turns and looks into the darkness. Not noticing the entity standing there, he replies that there is nothing. With the demon monk visible behind him, Jang states that this is exactly why he wants to understand what is happening. Outside, a guard tries to block the way, saying that the young master is still recovering, but soon a woman orders him to step aside. Shortly after, Mrs. Seok enters the room with her maidservants, surprising both men. With a serious look, the woman addresses Zheng and says that they need to have a conversation. The young man simply stares back at her, maintaining a neutral expression. Mrs. Seok repeats that they need to talk as her maidservants enter the room. Immediately, Go-chan hurriedly bows to greet the First Lady. Zheng then realizes from her speech that this woman is the master's first wife. Soon, he identifies her as Mrs. Seok from the Seok martial clan. He remembers Cam's warning, who listed her as the most dangerous person due to her intelligence and background. Recalling that he should fear her more than the first son, he formally greets her as the First Lady. He then apologizes for not being able to stand due to his leg condition. Relieved, Go-chan thinks that the greeting went better than he expected and hopes he responds well to the questions. However, the woman abruptly cuts him off, saying she is not there to hear his greetings. Without warning, she strikes directly at Zheng's injured leg with her fan. The sudden blow leaves both him and Go-chan completely shocked by her behavior. With a cry of pain, the young man writhes on the bed, surprising everyone. At the same time, one of the maidservants points a blade at Go-chan's neck and warns him not to move, freezing him in place. Leaning over the young man, Mrs. Seok comments that it seems he is indeed injured and that it must be difficult. With a smile, she says he had to hurt himself just to make his lie more convincing. She continues, stating that despite the convincing testimony, there is a detail he overlooked. Soon, she reveals the flaw in his story, explaining that a skilled shaman would never be possessed during a ritual. She begins to laugh, finding the idea that the shaman simply went mad ridiculous. Furious, she accuses the young man of daring to try to deceive her with such a poorly crafted lie and attacks him again. With the impact of the blow, Zheng is thrown away from the bed, while the other shouts his name. Unfazed, the woman warns that she will not repeat herself and demands to know what he saw and heard. Fallen on the floor near the window, The young man remains silent with his injured leg still on the ground. A faint smile appears on his face. Seeing his reaction, Mrs. Siok lets out a mocking laugh. Suddenly, he bursts into loud, uncontrolled laughter. Surprised by the change, the woman asks if he has lost his mind. After the laughter, he simply stares at her with a confident smile on his face. Then he calls for the demon monk, who appears imposing behind him. In an instant, the entity lunges forward and attacks Mrs. Siok, catching her off guard with the blow. Confused, she wonders what just passed by her. Soon after, one of her servants is attacked and subdued by the dark entity. Horrified, Mrs. Siok recognizes that phenomenon, remembering what happened to the shaman. Appearing behind her, Jing reminds her of his true objective, questioning whether it is not the secret manual and the seal that she needs. While the servant is restrained by the entity, he asserts that she should have tried to negotiate instead of threatening him. Speechless, the woman simply glares at him with an expression of pure fury. Zhang then states that he has no interest in becoming the master of the hall, leaving the choice to believe or not up to her. He then reminds her that her son is not the only one who wishes to attain that position. With a smile, he threatens that, since he is treated this way, he will have no choice but to seek out his second brother. He then changes tactics, reminding her that the youngest son is also talented in martial arts. To provoke her further, he suggests that it would be a good idea to hand over the secret manual to the youngest as a way to make amends. Stepping forward, Jen asks if she finally understands that she is not the one with the advantage in the situation. With a final smile, he simply bids her farewell, telling her to take care. Shortly after, a scream echoes from the Hall of the Flower of Blessing, the residence of Mrs. Siok. Back in her chambers, the woman vents her fury by destroying the furniture around her. As she kicks an object, she repeatedly screams about how he dared to do that. One of her servants approaches and asks the lady to calm down. Indignant, Mrs. Siok shouts if it seems like she can calm down, complaining that a fool stole the fruits of her labor. She then laments having let her guard down, as she thought he would confess everything, and now she does not understand how he changed so suddenly. Suddenly, she looks at a box and a possibility arises in her mind. She finally understands that he had been hiding his true nature all along. With that, she recalls how the young man was always praised for being clever, until her mother's family lost influence. She concludes that perhaps he changed his attitude just to protect himself. Her servant then offers to go kill him before he can try anything. However, the lady denies the idea, explaining that it would be even worse if the secret manual fell into someone else's hands. Still, she asserts that she will not allow him to manipulate her that way. She then orders that they inform the Phoenix Pavilion about the death of the shaman Mio Sin. The servant reacts in shock at the mention of the Phoenix Pavilion. The decision referred to the organization of shamans of which Meo Shin was a part. With a determined smile, the woman warns that things will not go Zhang's way so easily. Soon, at midnight, the scene shifts to the medicinal hall. Inside, he reads in a book about how a person becomes a malevolent spirit due to their resentment. He continues reading and discovers that the strength of the spirit depends on many conditions. The reading reveals the different types of spirits, and he understands that a yellow spirit can even kill a person. Suddenly, the image of the demon monk appears before him. Jing asks if he has found what he was looking for, and deduces that the monk must be a yellow spirit. With the help of the entity, he locates a disguised door with a rare herb, useful for finding underground passages. He then remembers that the spirit's powers did not work on Mrs. Siok, forcing him to attack the servant in her place. As he recalls how the power worked well on guard Go Chan, he finally opens the secret passage. Before him, the wooden panel opens and reveals a dark entrance. With that, he wonders if the woman would be a top-class martial artist, concluding that the power would not work on Cam either. Next, he turns his attention back to the book, searching for a new solution. With that, he decides that it would be a good idea to obtain a stronger spirit by reading about the green spirit, capable of controlling the environment and causing hallucinations. The book describes it as very dangerous and warns that the entity must be exorcised. Despite the warning, he simply closes the book and says it's fine, determined to proceed with the plan. Soon after, he positions himself at the entrance of the passage and announces that it is time to go. As he descends the stairs, he reinforces his goal of finding the secret manual and the seal. The young man questions whether they dug such a deep hole just to hide a manual and a seal. He then concludes that the treasure must be valuable enough for everyone to desire it, and that he has nothing to lose by obtaining it. Now, knowing that the powers of the demon monk do not work on the guard Cam, he understands that he needs to obtain more cards to use against him. Upon reaching the end of the stairs, he finally spots a large gate and wonders if it is there. The young man advances with the lantern towards the gate in the midst of a vast cave. He then recalls the information he obtained about the location being beneath the medicinal hall, behind 4 doors. With that, he locates the 4th stone door. Upon opening the heavy entrance, he notices something unexpected. Looking into the dark well, he realizes he still needs to descend further. Even so, he pauses for a moment and wonders if that is really necessary. However, as he takes a step, he accidentally steps on a loose plate on the floor. Immediately, a trap is triggered and a huge stone falls from the ceiling towards him. With a quick jump, Jang manages to dodge just in time for the rock to smash into the ground. Amid the rubble, he admits that he did not expect to find traps along the way. Suddenly, he notices glimmers on the walls, indicating that more danger is on the way. With no time to think, he uses the lantern to defend himself from a rain of arrows coming his way. With agility, he deflects the approaching projectiles using the lantern's shaft. One last arrow flies directly at him, requiring a quick reaction. With a surprising move, he catches the projectile with the lantern, stopping the attack. Jang then realizes that the real challenge is just beginning as he sees a massive trap descending. While balancing on the enormous moving log, he wonders if the secret manual is really that valuable. He then begins to suspect that perhaps there is something else hidden there, something that might be even more important than the treasures he is seeking. Before him, a sequence of giant and dangerous weapons swings along the path. With a smile on his face, he decides that he will find out for himself and leaps into the challenge. Finally, he reaches his destination and announces that he is there, surprised by the symmetry of the underground place. With that, he moves forward through the area, which appears to be a spacious and well-organized corridor. Observing his surroundings, he notices that the place seems inhabited and wonders if someone used to train there. Putting the doubt aside, he decides to continue forward anyway. Next, he finds a wooden chest positioned on a table in the center of the room. As soon as he opens the chest lid, he confirms with satisfaction that he has found what he was looking for. Inside, he finds the 2 manuals he sought, the Adamantine Resolution and the Wooden Heart Sword Transformation Technique. He recalls Go Chan's explanation that the secret manual is divided into a sword technique and a cultivation technique. Without hesitation, he decides to take both manuals. Even so, he finds it strange that only those 2 manuals are stored in such a large and protected place. Soon, his attention is drawn to another chest in the corner of the room, and he wonders what that could be. Upon closer inspection, he notices that the chest seems unnecessarily heavy and not very functional. Additionally, he sees marks on the floor, indicating that the object was dragged there. With that, he begins to push the chest, suspecting that it may have been placed there to hide something. As he moves the object, he confirms his suspicion by finding what was hidden. Underneath the chest, he notices that there is something concealed in the floor. Soon he opens a trapdoor that was disguised in the floorboards. Inside, he is surprised to find another wooden chest. He takes the object out and realizes that it is also sealed with talismans. Noticing the sinister energy, he begins to remove one of the seals, understanding that this was something they wanted to hide beyond the manual. As soon as he does, the lantern's light reacts with an unexpected intensity, catching him by surprise. He then wonders why the lantern would be reacting that way. Inside the chest, he finds a book with a leather cover. As he holds the object, he realizes that it is not an ordinary book, as it has a strange smell and texture. With a sinister smile, he reaches the terrible conclusion that the book is made of human skin. Far away, amidst a party, a voice orders the drums to be played. Then the same man demands that they play louder and with more joy, laughing uncontrollably. Soon, the man is revealed to be the second young master, Mok En-Payon, who exclaims how great everything is. Looking out the window, he comments that it is incredible and that the main hall looks even brighter today. With a smile, Mok En-Payon concludes that this happens because he is one step closer to becoming the master of the hall. He then credits his success to someone who has joined his side. Shortly after, the guard Cam enters the room and is approached by the young master. The guard then formally greets him, addressing him as the second young master. The second young master apologizes for having made the guard wait so late. He justifies the modest reception with his father's health, to which Cam responds that he already feels honored. With a laugh, the young man invites him to come in, and the other readily agrees. In a more private location, Mok En-Payon questions with a smile if it is true that Mok Gyeongwon has lost his martial arts skills. The memory of the deceased heir confirms for the guard that the impostor has no martial training. Moreover, he decides that he will not reveal the farce, as it would be dangerous if they discovered that he failed to protect the true young master. Cam confirms the suspicion with a smile, assuring that the information is correct. He categorically states that, at the moment, the young Mok Jae-moon cannot use his martial arts. Satisfied, the brother comments that, besides already being powerless, he he now cannot even fight, which removes him from the succession dispute. He then expresses gratitude for having someone as talented as Cam working for him from now on. Shortly after, he changes the subject and asks if the guard really cannot tell him the reason why the other lost his skills. The second young master promises to forgive him even if it is his fault, reminding him that everyone makes mistakes. Cam formally apologizes and states that he still cannot tell him the truth. He assures that ignorance will not harm him, and the host decides to trust him after all. He then reveals that he knows his past as the former assassin of that infamous place. With this, Cam reacts with astonishment to the revelation. Noticing the reaction, the young man asks what is wrong. With a smile, he further inquires if the other's past was also a secret. Quickly, Cam responds that it is not, trying to disguise his tension. The master observes him in silence for a moment. He then dismisses him for now, saying he will call him again later. From the window, he watches the guard walk away through the courtyard. As soon as he leaves, he comments that his brother must be plotting something. He then orders one of his men, Cho Il-sung, to check what is being hidden and if the other really lost his martial arts. Cho Il-sung asks if he should just check the situation. The master replies that it would not be fun and orders him to hurt the brother during the check. The man readily agrees to the given order. Meanwhile, in the cave, Zhang opens a secret compartment in the floor. He then takes out a mysterious book, feeling a pulse coming from the object in his hands. He realizes that, paradoxically, the sensation under his fingers is of something clearly close to death. The image of an agonizing figure represents the energy emanating from the book. With this, he wonders why an object like that was hidden there. Curiosity overwhelms him, and he expresses the desire to open the book to check its contents. Suddenly, a dark energy emerges from the place, taking shape in front of him. Zheng watches the figure materialize and questions if that would be the demonic monk. Then he asks what is happening. The creature's eyes shine intensely upon seeing the book. Then the entity kneels before him in a gesture of reverence. The boy repeats, surprised, the words demonic monk. Upon observing the creature react so intensely, he concludes that this book is surely something grand. He then puts the object away but realizes that if the monk is there, someone must be nearby. Soon, he concludes that there is an intruder in the place. At that exact moment, the man sent by Mok Yenpyeong rushes toward the location. From atop a tree, he spots a figure and is startled. Soon, he is surprised to recognize the guard Go Chan standing outside. The man questions why he is there on watch instead of protecting the injured young master. Suspicious that his target is indeed hiding something, he moves across the roof toward the room. Carefully, he approaches the window to spy on what is happening inside. Looking in, he finds only Zheng lying on the bed, in silence. The intruder wonders why he would be just sleeping, and why the guard would be outside. With that, he decides he needs to check the young master's internal energy. As soon as he enters, something on the table catches his attention and leaves him completely perplexed. He recognizes the book with astonishment, questioning what it is in his hands. While flipping through it, he can barely contain his shock. Soon he convinces himself that this is the true secret manual. Then he realizes that this is everything they need to gain an advantage in the succession dispute. He quickly declares that their victory is guaranteed. However, before he could lead, a hand suddenly grabs him from behind. In a swift movement, Zheng attacks him, slamming his head against the table. Afterward, he questions him about what he was doing in his room, asking if he was sleepy. With a smile, he says he can make him sleep because he is a kind man. Completely dominated, the man concludes that his opponent is insane. Thus, Zheng repeatedly attacks him, leaving him gravely injured. The intruder falls to the floor, nearly unconscious after the sequence of blows. Soon after, the young man approaches and comments that the man has finally woken up. Desperate, he realizes he is hanging upside down in the middle of the room. Crouched down, Zheng then prepares for the interrogation, holding a dagger. With the dagger by his side, he approaches the man and says it is time for them to talk. Although the intruder is fallen and injured moments before, as soon as the guard Go Chan enters, he recognizes him as Cho Il-sung and confirms to Zheng that he is one of the guards of the second son. With that, Zheng questions why a man from the second son would be there. Go Chan replies that he does not know, but that, by the disguise, the guy had bad intentions. Soon, the interrogator approaches the guard and says that, in that case, they will have to make him confess. The subordinate pleads not to be tortured, suggesting it would be better to just let him go. Even with the warning that the second son would be furious, Zheng immobilizes him and replies that he will think about it. Then he steps away carrying the man, while the other insists that he stop. Alone and defeated, the guard screams that he no longer cares about the situation. Soon after, he wonders if Zheng would really kill the man, trying to convince himself that he is smart. Even so, he cannot help but wonder if the plan will really not end with the prisoner's death. In another room, the hanging man wakes up and demands to be released immediately. The executioner, sitting below, asks why he should do that. The guy reveals that he is there on Muk Enpyong's orders and threatens him, saying he will not survive after having his face seen. He then demands the secret manual in exchange for the promise that his life will be spared, unaware that Zheng mocks that threat. With a smile, the interrogator comments that the situation is amusing. He then concludes that his older brother must value his subordinates a lot, since the other acts as if he has the upper hand. Zheng then agrees to release him, to which the prisoner responds that it was a wise choice. As he begins to promise that he will convince his master, he is suddenly interrupted. Suddenly, the interrogator surprises him with a lightning question. He then shows the finger he just removed and asks whose it could be. The man panics upon realizing that a finger has been cut off, but he felt absolutely nothing when he notices that he cannot move or feel his internal energy. Zheng reveals that he used a paralyzing poison. He explains that he prepared the poison in the medicinal room and that his body will be numb for hours, before saying he will ask some questions. He then threatens him, saying he will remove 1 finger per second if he does not answer immediately. Soon after, he asks the first question, wanting to know why his brother sent him. With a smile, he gives the order to start answering. Faced with hesitation, the torturer begins counting and removes another of his fingers. He then warns that he will continue if there is no answer and proceeds with the counting. Even with the man's desperate screams, the process continues, leading to the 3rd finger. The count reaches 4, and finally, the prisoner screams, begging him to stop. Zheng then calmly announces that the next target will be the thumb. With no alternatives, the man finally gives in and starts to speak. He confesses that young master Mok Enpyong ordered him to check if Zheng had really lost his martial arts. After the revelation, a tense silence fills the room for a moment. The interrogator then repeats the phrase about having lost his martial arts, thoughtful. With a smile, he comments on the enemy's quick change of sides and prepares for the next question. He then directly asks him if it was guard Cam who gave him that information. The prisoner confirms, and with that, Zheng realizes that the other guard was clever to tell a half-truth to protect himself. The bound figure is shocked by the deduction, not understanding how he was discovered so quickly. With an indifferent air, the torturer states that, for now, he has no more questions to ask. Still terrified, the detainee asks what will happen to him next. Convinced that his death is inevitable, he stares at the dark figure before him. To the executioner's surprise, the prisoner breaks the silence and begins to speak. In an act of desperation, he immediately swears loyalty to the new master. He then praises the intelligence of the man before him, declaring him the perfect candidate to lead the clan. In light of the pleas and the promise to risk his life, Zheng finally agrees to accept him. Soon after, he warns that, in any case, there is something the newly converted needs to do for him. With a smile, he asks if he can make the request right at that moment. Relieved, the other responds affirmatively and asks to receive the order. However, as the subordinate begins to ask what it would be, Zheng attacks him with the dagger. With a smile, the aggressor reminds him of the promise that he was willing to risk his own life. Looking at the wounded body, he says he will borrow a bit of the liquid that is flowing from him. Completely horrified, the man curses, unable to believe what is happening. In his last moments of consciousness, he reflects that he never imagined risking his life would be like this. The young man then realizes that he cannot open the rosary that seals the book using force. He remembers that a seal made of pure energy can be weakened by pouring something impure over it. With that, he decides to use the liquid from Cho Il-sung's body to pour over the book. The boy watches, astonished, as the object reacts to the complete impurity. In an instant, the energy of the seal begins to react violently to the spilled substance. With a crack, the seal finally shatters completely. He then wonders what will come out of the book now that it is open. Before he can finish, a strange energy begins to form on the ground. Suddenly, the spilled liquid explodes upwards, enveloping him completely. The box overflows with a dense, reddish energy. In seconds, the energy takes over the entire environment. The boy stands up, surprised, amidst the strange energy surrounding him. Soon, the force begins to swirl around him, forming an intense whirlwind. He watches, perplexed, as the red energy swirls around him. With that, a humanoid figure begins to materialize amidst the veils of energy. The form becomes clearer and more imposing with each passing moment. Then, a new explosion of power violently throws him backward. Suddenly, the entire environment transforms into a sea of red liquid. The observer tries to understand the sudden change around him. Soon, the scene becomes a completely different place. In front of him, he sees the mysterious figure walking towards him. The entity walks gracefully, getting closer and closer. Finally, a woman with a red veil reveals herself before his eyes. Even so, Zheng realizes that the presence of that entity is much stronger than that of a green spirit. He soon explains that this is the 5th level of ghost as described by the Yin-Yang school. This creature is known as a blue spirit. Even surprised, he admits that, to be honest, he was only expecting a green spirit. Then the boy ironically wonders if he should consider himself lucky to encounter something so powerful. Suddenly, a wave of energy hits him hard, throwing him to his knees on the ground. With a superior look, the entity calls him a foolish and insignificant being. The overwhelming pressure keeps him pinned to the ground, completely immobilized. As she takes something from her head, the woman orders him to abandon his soul. She then completes the order, demanding that he offer his body in exchange. He remembers the description, the 5th level of ghosts, the blue spirits. The book details that they are hateful spirits with the power to create hallucinations, requiring the strength of 10 shamans to subjugate them. Seeing him resist, she questions why he is still fighting and calls him slow. Struggling against the pressure, the young man finally understands the reason for the warning in the book. He concludes that, although blue spirits are dangerous, the situation is, at the very least, interesting. Surprised by his audacity, the entity questions what he means by that. While leaning on the ground, the challenger mocks that all ghosts desperately desire someone's body. With a provocative smile, he concludes that ghosts cannot do anything without a physical body. The woman in red remains silent, merely observing the provocation. Then he openly challenges her, saying that if she wants his body so badly, she will have to try to take it. In response, an invisible force holds him, guiding him towards the woman. With a superior gaze, the entity knocks him to the ground once again, calling him a foolish mortal. She then declares that she is leaving him no other choice. Soon after, she fires an energy beam that hits him squarely. Even gravely injured, he mutters about her needing to use force. With a victorious air, she asks if he finally understands that there is nothing he can do. Finally, she orders him to be a good boy and hand over his body. With a sudden movement, the young man manages to steady himself on the ground again. The woman in red reacts with clear surprise at his resistance. Although panting and with his body wounded, the boy manages to stay on his feet. The entity realizes that he has endured an attack that left him gravely injured, concluding that he is not an ordinary human. Still, she asserts that it doesn't matter and restrains him again with her energy. In an instant, he is lifted into the air, completely immobilized before her. With a different tone, the woman decides to make an offer, promising to grant a wish if he hands over his body. Confused, the young man asks why she is offering something like that. Therefore, she explains that she is being kind, as it is not good for her if his body is too damaged. The young man then asks what would happen if he simply rejected the offer made. The woman coldly replies that in that case, she would eliminate him and seek another human. He remains silent for a moment, absorbing the threat. Soon after, he admits that he indeed has a wish. The entity immediately perks up, enthusiastically confirming that he has a wish. Then she promises that if he tells her, she will destroy his enemies until only ashes remain. With a manic look, she demands to know what his wish is. The young man then reveals that she shut her mouth and become his familiar spirit. Completely shocked and furious at the proposal, the woman grinds her teeth. Regaining her composure, she agrees to his decision in a threatening manner. As she releases her energy, she states that he sought that fate himself. She then attacks him once more, calling him a foolish and insolent mortal. The force of the attack sends her flying back, to her complete surprise. Soon, a great explosion of energy fills the entire space. The boy is seen floating in the midst of the whirlwind of power. The opponent then threatens him, asking if he could endure having his body terribly injured. Even so, she laments that it would be a shame if he were damaged in the process. Suspended in darkness, he seems to feel something filling the environment. As he floats, he notices a strange taste in his mouth. The sensation is of something dense, sticky, and with a metallic bitterness. Finally, all 5 senses tell him that what he is tasting is blood. However, he notes that there is something strange about that sensation. He then realizes that it is completely different from anything he has felt before. The young man remembers having tasted the thrill of battle during his recent revenge. Back then, what he felt was the vibration and warmth of life itself. He then realizes that what he is feeling now is the presence of death itself. Upon noticing the change, the woman in red reacts with complete astonishment. Suddenly, the space shatters as it is revealed that everything was just an illusion. The illusory world continues to crumble, revealing the true room behind it. With the collapse of the technique, the enemy is forcefully thrown back. Finally, he steps onto the true ground. Silently distanced, the entity watches him from the floor dazed. Incredulous, she tries to understand how that could have happened. The woman then concludes that what he did should have been completely impossible. Then suddenly, a butterfly materializes in the palm of her hand. With a flap of its wings, the butterfly flies away. Soon after, it approaches the boy, who watches it calmly even with his face being cut. Looking at him, the woman realizes that she has reached a state of transcendence. Transcendence is a rare technique to escape illusions that requires the complete rejection of the 5 senses. Even so, she questions herself, as the boy is not even a shaman. She then raises the hypothesis that perhaps he was born with the qualities of a great shaman. Faced with the entity's confusion, the young man bursts into loud, provocative laughter. Irritated, the woman asks why he dares to laugh, and warns him that he still does not have the advantage. With a smirk, he replies that no, he just had a fun idea. Not understanding, The figure questions him about what he means by fun. Suddenly, she reacts with shock, screaming as she realizes something terrible. With a wicked smile, the young man reveals the secret book in his hand. Soon, according to ancient texts, powerful spirits possess a vessel that connects them to this world. Upon realizing that the book is the vessel, he bites it and tears off a piece with his teeth. At that very moment, the entity is wounded, with marks appearing on its body. Then, the woman screams in pain, feeling the same damage that was inflicted on the book. Holding the torn piece, he confirms with satisfaction that he was right. Still in shock, she questions how a mortal was able to wound a book protected by demonic energy. She then reveals that not even the best shamans could destroy it and furiously screams that he has enraged her. With a swift movement, she advances and pins him against the wall. With her face close to his, she dares him to say that this is also an illusion. She then warns that she no longer needs his body and that he must die for his foolishness. Even while being strangled, the boy taunts her, asking why she simply doesn't take the book. After a moment of shock, he confirms his suspicion, stating that she cannot touch it. Furious at his audacity, the entity prepares to attack. Finally, she unleashes a wave of energy and screams for him to spit out the piece of the book immediately. He realizes that the blood that entered his body is causing a violent reaction, reversing his internal circulation. Desperate, she continues screaming for him to spit out the piece. Even as his body weakens, the young man can clearly feel the rage of the creature's soul. With her eyes glowing with fury, she shows her hatred for someone as strong as herself, along with a desire for revenge. Amidst the madness, the woman calls him an absurd mortal. With one last strike, she hits him squarely, making him scream in pain. Suddenly, the entity's eye shines, and the reflection reveals a scene of battle. The setting shifts to a city in flames, with destroyed buildings everywhere. Completely disoriented, he wonders where he is. Soon he realizes he is standing on an endless sea of fallen bodies. The horrifying sight reveals a terrible battle, with dozens of defeated warriors. Confused, he tries to understand what it is he is seeing. In the distance, he spots a familiar figure and recognizes it as the Blue Spirit. With that, a sword appears in the entity's hand, which she tears a piece of her clothing and ties to the hilt of the weapon. Finally, she turns and faces a throne at the top of a long staircase. The boy admits that he couldn't hear what was being said, but he could vividly feel all the rage emanating from her. With her face marked by fury, the woman advances, holding her sword firmly. Thus, she positions herself before the staircase, staring at the mysterious figure seated on the throne. From above, the light-haired man watches her in a provoking silence. Soon, a smile of superiority appears on the face of the horned figure. Her eyes widen in a mix of fury and determination. With a war cry, the combatant leaps toward the throne to attack. Even in the face of her advance, the opponent maintains a smug smile on his face. In an instant, the woman delivers a sword strike that is suddenly stopped. Right after, he counters and strikes her with a terrible blow to the chest. Completely in shock, she looks at the wound, unable to believe what has happened. The pain from the attack paralyzes her completely, sealing her fate. With one last movement, the opponent throws her away, making her roll down the stairs. Finally, her body lies on the ground, completely defeated. Soon, an army of warriors with glowing eyes emerges to surround the area. In silence, the soldiers approach in formation, marching in unison. Without hesitation, they form a circle around the fallen woman's body. Then, the warriors raise their daggers, ready to deliver the final blow. With her face marked by defeat, she cries as she faces her end. With that, the vision of her terrible end spreads under the red sky. Back in the void, the young man looks down and sees only the outline of her body. Before him, the remnants of the entity's soul merge with the book, which now floats in the void. With a sudden scream, he wakes up startled, back in reality. Sitting against the pillar, he notices a red thread coming out of his chest and wonders what it is. Fallen on the ground, the woman stammers, unable to understand what is happening. With wide eyes, she screams in disbelief, questioning if she has become a familiar spirit. With a satisfied smile, the young man confirms that he has obtained a blue spirit, while the woman screams that this can only be a nightmare. Suddenly, the woman screams for him to let her go, but she is forcefully repelled when she tries to attack him. Then she feels a sharp pain in her neck, where red marks begin to appear. As she coughs uncontrollably, he merely observes the scene without understanding. With that, he curses the situation upon realizing that the familiar spirit feels the same pain as its owner. Soon, he wonders about the demonic monk, since he had fully recovered just moments before. Far away, the enemy remains motionless in a courtyard while Go-chan sleeps. With some resignation, the young man suggests that since they will be together from now on, they should introduce themselves. He then introduces himself as Ma Kyung-won and asks for her name. Seeing that he receives no response, he warns that in that case, he will call her whatever he wants. With a teasing smile, he decides to call her Red Dung Beetle. The entity reacts furiously, shouting and asking if he has gone mad. As the young man laughs and concludes that she didn't like the name, the woman screams, questioning if he dares to mock her. She then arrogantly refuses, saying she will not tell her name to a stupid mortal. Thus he decides he will call her whatever he pleases, thinking that since she is a blue spirit, her name will indeed be Blue Spirit. He confirms with a smile that this is how he will address her. In response, the woman turns her back with disdain. Faced with the situation, he decides he will have to persuade her gradually. He soon changes the subject, mentioning the book with the unusual cover. He then asks if she knows what is inside, but the entity pretends not to know who he is talking about. Next, she refuses to answer, saying she is busy and knows nothing. Upon opening the book, the boy is surprised by what he sees. He soon realizes that the content was written with red marks. With an intrigued smile, he comments that it is a very interesting book. Even so, he does not understand what the characters mean, as they seem to make no sense together. The observer looks at him with a slight smile, seeming to enjoy the scene. Without receiving help, he concludes that he will have to discover the meaning on his own. Standing, he begins to analyze the book more closely. He then starts to read a sentence aloud about trusting the mind in another way. As he continues reading, the woman turns around in surprise, realizing that he has managed to decipher the text. As she approaches, the young man continues to read that what seems to be may not be reality. Suddenly, a powerful energy emanates from the entity and fills the entire room. Surrounded by the same aura, he reads the sentence about the demon that stands in the way of good. With that, the book shines brightly, revealing that the Supreme Blood has the power to reverse everything. Jane then realizes with surprise that his hand is stuck to the book's cover. Shocked, the woman screams that this cannot be true. She then questions him, incredulous how he managed to do that. Not understanding, the young man asks what he did, and if it has anything to do with the book. At that moment, he recoils, his body overcome by intense pain. The entity watches him in despair, stammering that this cannot be happening. In a panic, she screams for the mortal to stop breathing immediately. She soon instructs him to empty his mind and think of absolutely nothing. He then closes his eyes and concentrates to control the energy around him. Slowly, he manages to absorb the aura back into the book. The woman reacts in surprise, wondering how he learned to control the technique so quickly. Gradually, the energy that surrounded him is absorbed back into the cover in his hand. Incredulous, she wonders how someone without martial arts training managed to undo the binding ritual. She soon reflects that it was already a miracle he managed to perform the ritual in the first place. Still under the effect of the energy, she says she is witnessing things she has never seen in her life. Then he collapses exhausted on the ground, saying he thought he was going to suffocate and asking what that was. The entity explains that it was because he could not control the ritual and his breathing was wrong. With a smile, he teases, asking why she decided to explain things only now. In response to the provocation, the woman reacts completely irritated and speechless. While he responds calmly, she screams that she only helped him to avoid being hurt by his foolishness. She then explains that the ritual serves to manipulate the nature of things, and that he hurt himself because he used the power without a target. Pointing to the side, she suggests that he try using the technique on that. On the ground lay the severely injured body of his brother's subordinate. As he approaches, the boy is instructed to aim for the energy core of the guard, and he confirms that it is below the navel. With some impatience, the woman asks if she really needs to explain everything, and he confirms that yes. Finally, she instructs him to try chanting the incantation again. He takes a deep breath, and the energy begins to manifest around him once more. With his hand over the body, he repeats the chant he had read in the book. As soon as he recites that the Supreme Blood has the power to reverse everything, an explosion of energy erupts from his body. With this, the guard's energy begins to be pulled directly into the palm of his hand. Surprised by the sensation, the young man wonders what is happening. He soon feels a warmth traveling through his veins and circulating around his energy core. The woman then explains that the technique serves to pull anything and make it adhere, even ki. With a satisfied smile, she asks if he can feel the power, concluding that this is how the attachment ritual works. Thus, the blue spirit explains that this is how the attachment ritual works. Soon, the young man feels a warm energy enveloping his torso and realizes that this is the Ki Go-chan mentioned. He then understands that, while Go-chan said it takes time to gather Ki, this technique allows for much faster absorption of energy from others. With this, he concludes that he can become stronger in less time. However, the energy he absorbs suddenly disperses into the air. In response, the blue entity explains that the energy simply spread out, as that is how Kwai works. Furthermore, she continues by saying that a special method is needed to gather the energy in the core, give it a unique characteristic, and prevent it from mixing with others. In other words, she states that it is impossible to collect Kai using the attachment ritual. At that moment, the boy laments having thought he found a shortcut, and the woman teases him, asking if he thought becoming a master would be so easy. Even so, she tells him not to be disappointed, as the ritual still has many excellent uses. Shortly after, she reveals that the attachment ritual is just the basics of the 8 techniques of thought breaking, and that learning just this opens up infinite possibilities. With this, she explains that even if it spreads, Kai is still Qi and instructs him to try to concentrate it in his hand, making it circulate. Not knowing what to do, the young man asks how. Finally, the figure clarifies that circulation in corners are only meant to help visualize the right image in the mind, and if he can achieve that, he will be able to send the key to his hand. While observing him, the woman doubts he can do it, lamenting that the key will be wasted on an untrained novice. Despite this, he concentrates and tries to control the energy floating in his hand. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, he manages to gather the power in the palm of his hand. With a quick movement, he closes his fist, concentrating all the energy there. Seeing this, the spiritual master screams, unable to believe what she is witnessing. Then the boy turns towards the wall and prepares to strike. Shortly after, he punches the wall with all his strength. The impact of the attack sends a shockwave reverberating throughout the room. Totally incredulous, she wonders if he really managed to do that as a complete beginner. With a satisfied smile, the young man admires his own achievement and says that it was great. Completely impressed, the woman questions who this mortal is. Soon she reflects that, even having seen many talents, she has never encountered someone like him, who broke through the wall with a punch. With a sinister smile, the boy understands why everyone values martial arts, concluding that it will be easier to defeat people. Finally, the declaration leaves the blue spirit completely shocked and speechless. Soon, she realizes that he understood the true essence of martial arts, that the main point is to defeat the opponent in the most efficient way. Impressed, the blue spirit begins to say something. Meanwhile, excited about what he learned, Zheng asks what the second technique is, and the woman smiles mischievously, ready to respond. However, she suddenly interrupts herself, seeming irritated with herself. Turning around, she declares that she almost got tricked by a mortal, and that she would never do anything good for him. At that moment, she realizes she has said too much because he learns very quickly, understanding why the old masters clung to their disciples. When the boy calls her, she orders him not to speak to her and walks away. Regretting that he cannot ask anything more, the young man suddenly notices something in his hand. He questions the residue of energy on his fingers, since the master had said that everything would spread out. The boy then looks in her direction, hesitant to ask. In the end, he gives up the idea, concluding that she would not answer and that it is fun to discover things on his own. With this, he prepares to leave and calls her to come with him. Under the night sky, the scene shifts to another location. There, Mrs. Seok's escort warrior, Hoang, watches attentively. She is on guard in front of a large building known as the Phoenix Pavilion. Then, the door to one of the pavilion's rooms slowly opens. Inside the room, there is a collection of sinister-looking wooden statues. Next to them, sealed baskets with talismans are lined up on the floor. Among them, a large statue with skeletal features stands out in the environment. Soon after, the warrior enters the space and observes the large carved figure. As she walks through the room, she wonders why the room is filled with such macabre-looking wooden statues. She then approaches a lit brazier in the center of the hall. She then says that she is sure the other is already aware, as she sent a message in advance. Next, she continues, revealing that the shaman Mio Sin has died and that it was the third son, the young master Mak Jiangwon, who defeated him. The large statue remains silent, observing the scene. Soon after, the visitor offers 300 silver coins as an expression of mourning from Mrs. Seok, and 400 more if the other party accepts a new mission. With that, she reveals that the mission is to deal with the third young master and asks if the service will be accepted. A silence hangs in the air as the figure in the darkness considers the proposal. Suddenly, the flame of the brazier goes out, leaving only a trail of smoke. Relieved that it worked, Hoang bows in thanks. Finally, as she leaves the pavilion, the warrior walks away muttering under her breath. Once outside, Hoang admits that she felt watched in the sinister place and that she only goes there because of the missions. Meanwhile, back in the pavilion, the room remains silent and dark. Inside, Meo Sin's body lies on the floor, surrounded by the mysterious figures of the temple. Soon, one of them strikes its staff on the ground and asserts that it is sure of what happened. With that, it declares that it was, without a doubt, a murder. Next, the voice of one of the wooden statues agrees with the statement. One of the figures then deduces that the third son was possessed by a yellow spirit, as a witness saw the maid floating. Another raises the possibility that the boy turned the spirit into his familiar, but is immediately rebuffed with a shout that this is impossible. With that, they explain that there is no way to turn a legendary spirit into a familiar, concluding that the situation is very dangerous. In light of this, the main figure announces that they have reached a conclusion. He then orders that one of them must deal with the third son of the Mock Sword Hall, and help the resentful spirit move on. Promptly, one of the warriors with a covered face volunteers for the mission and accepts the order. The next morning, Go-chan wakes up with a big yawn. As he walks down the hallway, he complains that he wanted to sleep, but that guy sent him to do a task. Upon arriving at the room, he delivers the brazier, and Jang thanks him, leaving the guard surprised by his politeness. As he warms himself, Go-chan asks what he wanted the brazier for, and the young man replies that he has something he needs to burn. He then shows the secret manual of the mock sword hall, leaving the other completely shocked. Before the guard could finish asking how he got it, Jang starts tearing the pages out of the book. Soon, the boy throws the sheets into the fire, causing Go-chan to scream in total despair. As the manual burns, the young man watches calmly, indifferent to the panic beside him. With a smile, he manipulates the fire, while his companion thinks that this insane guy just burned the secret manual. Suddenly, Go-chan turns around and angrily asks what he is doing. Desperate, the guard questions why the young master burned the manual, since many wanted it and he could have used it to his advantage. At that moment, Jang slaps the cover of the book against his face and explains that it was exactly for that reason he needed to burn it. He then reveals that he did it so that only he could use the technique, leaving the other completely confused. Soon he points to his own head and says that it is right here. With a confident smile, he asserts that everything is already stored in his mind. The guard stands frozen with the revelation, sweating cold. Changing the subject, the young man turns and says that there is something Go-chan needs to do. He then hands over the cover and orders that, at dawn, it be delivered to Mrs. Seok and the second son. Not understanding, the other asks if he didn't just say that everyone wanted the manual. Looking at the fire, Jang replies that he likes a harmonious family. With a wicked smile, he begins to explain that if everyone receives a piece, it will be a beautiful scene to see, leaving his malicious intent hanging in the air. The suggestion makes the guard completely terrified. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Cam reflects that his mornings are quick. As soon as he wakes up, he makes his bed and gets dressed. Soon after, he cleans his room and checks his agenda for the day. Cam reveals that this is a routine of his days as an assassin, a life of control and planning. However, he believes that soon there will be no need for this anymore. While drinking his tea, he plans that as soon as he becomes the subordinate of the second son, he will finally achieve the position of elder. With a hint of nostalgia, he remembers how it seems like just yesterday that he worked as an orphaned assassin. Suddenly, a messenger interrupts him, informing that the young master Eun Pyong wishes to see him. Cam turns around, surprised by the unexpected summons. He quickly runs, cursing in frustration along the way. With his face marked by confrontation, he continues running in fury. A flashback reveals the reason, showing how the news of Cho Il-sang's disappearance left him in shock. The second son explains that he sent guard Cho to confirm if the third brother really lost his martial arts, but he disappeared without a trace. Back in the room, Mok Eun Pyong furiously questions if Cam dares to deceive him. Terrified, the guard assures that he did not lie and insists that there must be another problem. With a shout, the young master orders him to be quiet and throws an object that hits him hard. Eun Pyong then demands to know why guard Cho has not returned yet, asking if Cam thinks he is an idiot. Alone and injured, the subordinate wonders why things went so wrong, fearing that soon he will have no one to rely on. Determined, he pleads for time, promising to find Cho and prove that he was not lying. When the master begins to refuse, Cam interrupts him and solemnly swears by his right arm. He then states that the right arm is everything to a martial artist. Mok Eun Pyong observes the guard in silence for a moment. Finally, he agrees and orders the subordinate to prove his worth. The young master then shouts that he will give him 4 hours to find guard Cho, otherwise he will have to die. With determination, Cam responds that he will fulfill the order. As he walks away, he reflects that nothing has gone right since he took in that fraud. Cleaning his wound, he considers the unlikely possibility that the scoundrel is to blame. With that, he swears that he will not forgive him and leaves in fury. Upon exiting, Cam finds Go-chan in the courtyard and stares at him in surprise. Without hesitation, he lunges forward and violently grabs him by the neck. He then furiously questions if he is disobeying his order to watch the fraud. Go-chan denies it, but his superior demands to know why he is not at his post, accusing him of cooperating with the imposter. As he tries to explain, Cam notices something hidden in his garments. Soon, he pulls out the book cover and asks what it is. Desperate, Go-chan tries to stop him, shouting for him to wait. Cam then reads the title on the cover, The Technique of Transformation of the Wooden Heart Sword. With the book in hand, he glares at the guard with total distrust. With growing fury, he asks what the hell Go-chan has been doing. The other stands petrified with fear, unable to respond. Immediately, Cam begins to drag him forcefully across the courtyard. He takes him down the hallway, passing by other guards who merely watch the scene. Arriving at the room, he kicks the door with all his strength. He then throws Go-chan to the ground, right in front of Zhen. With the guard fallen and injured, the boy observes him and greets him calmly. Finally, the boy says, "Welcome, Guard Cam." In fury, Guard Cam demands an explanation, saying that just looking at the boy worsens his mood. With a mocking air, Zheng asks what he needs to explain. Immediately, the other says he has no time for that. As he approaches, he reinforces that he is sure he made his warning clear from the start. Suddenly, Cam lunges forward and attacks the young man with a high-speed punch. Right after, he grabs him and threatens, saying that if he tries anything, he will kill him. With a smile, Zheng replies that he doesn't remember him saying that, leaving the opponent furious. Cam then demands to know what he did with the guard of the second son. The boy reminds him that he knows how weak he is, while the other was an experienced martial artist. Cam agrees but admits that, even knowing this, he cannot shake the feeling that something is very wrong. Taking advantage of the confusion, the young man asks with a smile if that is not exactly the point. With a disturbing look, he questions how the third son, who lost his martial arts, could have defeated the guard. The provocation makes Cam even more suspicious. Zheng then reminds him of Cho Il-sang's own words, which guaranteed that the young master could not use martial arts. With that, the warrior finally understands everything and realizes that the one responsible was him all along. Filled with fury, Cam lunges forward with a weapon in hand, accusing the other of having taken down Cho Il-sung. With a mocking laugh, the boy asks what the guard will do now that he has clearly switched sides. Cam realizes that the fraud not only deceived everyone but was also the one who defeated the guard of the second son. In an instant, the two face off in a violent exchange of blows, leaving both with the marks of the confrontation. With the force of the impact, the entire room ends up in disarray. Soon both are breathing heavily, exhausted after the intense fight. Completely drained, Cam looks at the enemy and says that it has been 3 years of his life. He explains that, as an orphaned assassin, he sacrificed everything he had to join the clan and endured all kinds of work. In desperation, he states that his entire life depended on that effort. Cam then accuses the boy of ruining everything by getting rid of the third son and the second's favorite subordinate. Therefore, he declares that he needs to finish him off and leave, as he has no other option. However, as he prepares for the final blow, he suddenly stops upon hearing the young man's proposal. Cam then says that Cho Il-sung is no more, but there is something that can very well replace him. He continues, saying that he doesn't know how the boy managed to get that. Showing the book's cover, he reveals his true intention and asks if Zheng has the rest of the secret manual. With the book in mind, he demands an answer, believing that the secret manual will compensate him for the loss of Cho Il-sung. Soon, Zheng responds that he is not sure, prompting Cam to retort that he does not understand the situation he is in. He then threatens to kill him but proposes that he might change his mind if he receives the rest of the secret manual. The guard threatens him with a terrible and slow fate if he continues to lie, demanding that he hand over the manual while he still has patience. After a brief silence, the young man finally gives in and agrees to deliver what he wants. With an air of superiority, Cam says he should have done this earlier, believing that the boy can no longer pretend. He then extends his hand and demands that the manual be handed over immediately. However, instead of handing over something, Zheng simply grabs his hand. As Cam asks what he is doing, the other asserts that he has already given him the secret manual. With a victorious smile, he reveals that the content is all stored in his head. Soon after, the young man says that there is still one more thing missing. Suddenly, a powerful energy begins to emanate from both of their hands. With a smile, he thanks the guard as he activates the 8 techniques of thought break. An aura completely envelops him as he initiates the first technique. With the annexation technique, Cam horrifies as he realizes that all his inner energy is being drained. As he screams in pain, the opponent reveals that he was wondering who and how he would use this technique. He then completes by saying that the guard volunteered to be the test subject and that he is very grateful for that. In agony, Cam screams for the boy to let him go immediately. With a swift movement, he counterattacks with his weapon. The blow hits Zheng squarely, leaving marks from the confrontation. Furious, the attacker curses him, calling him an insane bastard. However, the young man manages to hold his hand, stopping the attack. To free himself, Cam kicks him hard, throwing him away. Both stare at each other from across the room, panting after the exchange of blows. Cam then realizes that he can no longer feel the energy in his hand, questioning if it has been absorbed. Zheng comments that, as expected from a top martial artist, that was not enough. The guard glares at him, realizing the gravity of the situation. With a sinister smile, the young man says he will have to find a different way to finish him off. Irritated, Cam questions if the boy thinks he can defeat him with such a dirty trick. He then shouts that it is impossible for someone like Zheng to defeat him. With a roar of fury, the guard charges again at the opponent at high speed. He manages to knock him down and prepares for the final blow with his dagger. At the last second, the young man invokes the demonic monk technique. With that, a hand of energy emerges and blocks the attack. To the opponent's surprise, incredulous, Cam wonders how he managed to block the blow. With his hand paralyzed, he demands to know what the boy did this time. Holding the weapon, Jang says he will show him that little dirty trick in more detail. Then, an imposing figure appears behind him and charges at the enemy. Terrified, Cam can barely react when the creature's hand grabs him. Soon, the young man warns that he will return what he took. He adds that he will return both the inner energy and the dagger. With a swift movement, he advances and strikes the guard with a devastating blow, making him scream in agony. Finally, Jang concludes by saying that both things, after all, belong to him. Severely injured, the guard stumbles back, distancing himself from the boy. Soon after, he bends over, showing the severity of his wound. While holding the weapon lodged in his chest, Cam realizes that the hit location is dangerous and that he cannot remove it. Therefore, he laments having been foolish, as the boy not only drained his energy, but also used a strange force to attack him. Still with a smile, the man seems to have a new plan. He then stares at Jung, who watches his reaction in surprise. With a victorious air, the injured man reveals that he has an ace up his sleeve and remembers that he prepared a poison specifically for a situation like this. Jang simply listens to him in silence and encourages him to continue. Breathless, Cam finally proposes that they should negotiate. Thus, he argues that if they continue to fight, it will be a loss for both. He then offers the antidote and money while planning to act submissively for now, waiting for an opportunity to deal with Shang later. Suddenly, he begins to have a violent reaction, not understanding what is happening. Soon after, he falls to his knees, completely weakened and in agony. Meanwhile, the opponent also shows a slight discomfort observing the scene. Not understanding, Cam realizes that something is wrong, questioning why his body is deteriorating even as he circulates his energy. With horror, he finally realizes that he has been poisoned. Jang then comments that the dagger's cut was not severe, but it still hurts, while the other demands to know what he did. Leaning against the window, the young man explains that it was nothing serious, just that the guard ended up with a bit of his blood on the dagger. With a smile, he reveals that his own blood is extremely poisonous. He then lists the ingredients that the opponent gave him, explaining that he consumed poisonous herbs until his blood became the poison itself. Provocatively, he asks if he finally understands the situation. With a cruel look, Jeng approaches and says that he does not need the antidote. At that moment, Cam panics, realizing that he is going to die. Mockingly, the young man asks why he is trembling, and if it is because he opened the window to relieve the fever from the poison. He then explains that a lower body temperature will allow him to live a little longer, as it slows the poison's progression. Totally desperate and with no options, the man extends his hand and begs for mercy. In a panic, he pleads for forgiveness and swears total loyalty to the young man. He humbles himself, promising to become his servant and do anything to have his life spared. As he continues to plead, Jeng watches him in silence for a moment. Soon, the boy says that he likes that attitude, leaving Cam surprised by the response. With a smile, he comments that with that posture, they will work very well together. Completely relieved, the guard begins to cry, believing he has been forgiven. However, the young man reveals that things would have been this way if he had acted that way from the beginning. The revelation leaves him in shock, not understanding the sudden change. With that, Jeng removes the dagger from his chest, saying that his loyalty is false and changes according to necessity. The boy then declares that he would be better off dead and decisively attacks him. With the final blow, the guard falls to the ground in agony. As he writhes, Jeng holds him firmly to the ground. The scene outside shows the boy over the body of the fallen guard in the room. Finally, Cam's body lies still on the ground, completely defeated. After the confrontation, Jeng stands up and lets out a sigh of relief. Still standing, he grumbles that the dagger's cut hurts a bit and that he changed clothes for nothing. He then picks up the manual's cover and reflects that, in any case, he already planned to get rid of Cam, as he knew his true identity. His gaze then turns to Go-chan, who remains fallen and pretending to be unconscious. With a dark look, the boy wonders if he should also get rid of the guard Go-chan. However, he decides not to, as the other proved he can keep secrets and may still be useful. Suddenly, Jeng orders him to get up, and the guard immediately obeys, completely frightened. The young man reveals that he noticed Go-chan gradually distancing himself during the fight, afraid of being trampled in the chaos. With a smile, he praises the man for knowing how to keep secrets and says he is liking him more and more. He then orders him to send anyone nearby away, as he will take care of Cam's body himself. Alone with the body, the boy approaches and prepares to begin what he needs to do. He then places his hand on the fallen guard, and a powerful aura begins to envelop them. Jang realizes he can feel the warmth of the energy, but it is of no use and is not what he wanted to verify. He then remembers the cold and sinister energy he felt in the underground pavilion. It was the same aura of death he sensed at the moment he took someone's life. Back in the present, he continues touching the body, confused about what is happening. As he absorbs the energy, he realizes it gathers in his core and enjoys that chilling sensation. He then wonders if, to collect more of this energy, he will need to take more lives. Suddenly, the figure of Blue Spirit appears in the room and watches him in silence. Turning to the demonic monk, the woman says she now understands why he allowed himself to be controlled by the boy. With the creature by her side, she asserts that the boy is nothing but a monster. Meanwhile, guard John Yangping tells Muk Enpyeong that he doesn't think Cam was lying. The young master agrees, and his subordinate asks why he treated him so harshly. With a superior air, Enpyeong explains that if you are too kind to someone from the start, the person becomes insolent. He then adds that by showing his rigidity and forgiving him afterward, Cam will learn to be submissive. With a wicked smile, the young man concludes that one must be cruel before being kind for the act of kindness to stand out. The guard says he understands the wisdom, but the master doubts his sincerity. John Yangpeng assures him he is serious, while thinking that the other is so talented he will surely be the successor. Suddenly, guard Han Sang bursts into the room, shouting that there is a big problem. Completely out of breath, he tries to catch his breath to deliver the news. Soon, he reveals that guard Cam just tried to get rid of young master Mok Gaongun, leaving everyone in shock. As Enpyeong questions Cam's actions, he is interrupted by the newcomer, who says that what matters is what the third son did next. He soon reveals that the third son announced to everyone that it was Enpyeong who was behind the assassination attempt. With the news, the young man shouts Mok Gaongun's name and strikes the table with a violent blow of his sword. Shocked, John Yangpyeong asks what kind of slander this is, demanding to know what happened to guard Cam. Han Sang then informs him that, apparently, Cam disappeared right after the confrontation. In a fit of rage, Enpyeong shouts Mok Gaongun's name. He then draws his sword and declares that he will not forgive him for this accusation. However, John Yangpyeong intervenes, warning that if the young master does anything now, he will only confirm the third son's testimony. Enpyeong refuses to accept this, questioning whether he should stand by while his brother revels in the situation. Calmly, the subordinate begins to propose an alternative solution. He suggests that instead, they can let the others handle the matter. With the young master now listening, his companion explains that if the story is true, the situation may be easier to resolve than it seems. He soon mentions the organization to which guard Cam was affiliated, reminding that they have their own rules and pride as assassins. John Yangpyeong reinforces that for this organization, failing a mission is unacceptable, with no exceptions. Finally, he volunteers to speak with them personally. He then reveals that the organization is one of the three major assassin sects of Zhongyuan, the sect of flying assassins. Surprised, Enpyeong repeats the name of the feared sect to himself. Soon, with a satisfied smile, he approves the plan proposed by his subordinate. Meanwhile, in his room, Zhang meditates under the watch of guard Go Chan. Suddenly, he becomes frustrated for having tried to create an energy core as described in the secret manual. As he attempts to concentrate the energy in his hands, it completely disperses. He laments yet another failed attempt, questioning what he might be doing wrong for his ki to dissipate. Not finding the answer, he decides to call for guard Go Chan, who responds promptly. Zhang then explains that he is trying to create an energy core, but his ki keeps dispersing, and asks if the other knows why. Go Chan internally scoffs, finding it curious that the boy who knew nothing about martial arts until yesterday has been able to feel and even circulate ki overnight. Afraid of getting hit if he says something wrong, he changes his attitude and asks if he can perhaps check the problem. He then explains that he will only infuse his own ki into his body to see why the energy is spreading. With that, he positions himself behind Zheng and asks him not to mind and just focus on circulating Kai. Zheng closes his eyes and takes a deep breath, and a new energy begins to manifest in his body. As the guard injects his ki, Zheng's energy reacts in an extremely intense way. He can hardly believe what he is feeling, realizing that something is very wrong. Then he notices that the boy is circulating energy with a smooth and unblocked flow, something that would only be possible with the help of a master. With this, he questions whether he is facing a true genius of martial arts. Suddenly, he feels a strange, cold, and sinister energy coming from within Zheng. Soon after, this same energy repels him forcefully, throwing him away. As the energy disperses, Zheng asks if the guard also felt that. He then asks Go Chan to be honest and say if it is impossible to create an energy core under these conditions, and the other confirms that no, he cannot. The guard explains that he felt something strange and unknown near his energy core, but he cannot say what it was. Zhang concludes that the cold energy is the problem and wonders if he will have to give up martial arts. Meanwhile, Go Chan reflects that this energy dispersed the qi, seeming to be the complete opposite of normal circulation. Upon hearing the word, the boy questions what he means by opposite. The guard hastens to say that it is just a hypothesis, but Zhang keeps repeating the word to himself. Soon he realizes that normal Kai is warm, but his death Kai is cold, concluding that the other is right. With this, he announces that he will try to circulate his Kai in the opposite direction, leaving Go Chan completely perplexed. Desperate, the man shouts for the young master to stop, warning that he will have a key blockage if he continues. Before he can finish the sentence, a wave of energy hits him squarely, leaving him gravely injured and unable to speak. Ignoring the guard, the blue spirit appears and demands silence. With a smile, she calls Zhang a fool, saying that he will end up killing himself by testing his stupid ideas. She then explains that, although she cannot harm him directly, the contract between them will be annulled if he dies by other means. She then comments to the demonic monk that they will be free sooner than they expected. She promises that as soon as Zhang dies and his soul leaves his body, she will tear him to pieces personally. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Hall of the Blessing Flower. There, a mysterious figure introduces herself to Mrs. Seok, saying her name is New Moon. The woman reveals that she is a shaman from the Phoenix Pavilion. Mrs. Seok finds it strange that even with the death of their most famous shaman, they sent only a young woman. She then questions why on earth the shaman brought the body of Master Taoist Mayo Sin with her. New Moon explains that the body of disciple Mayo will be useful in the ritual to track the spirit that killed him. Surprised, the hostess realizes that if Mayo was her disciple, it means that New Moon is much more powerful than he was. Before starting, the shaman says there is one thing she needs to make clear, and Mrs. Seok asks what it is. Firmly, New Moon declares that the third son will die. With a slight smile, Mrs. Seok admits that, to be honest, she did not like him. Soon after, she changes her expression and says that now she has changed her mind. The shaman then agrees and prepares to start the ritual. Next, New Moon joins her hands and begins to channel her energy. Suddenly, Mayo Sin's body shakes violently inside the coffin. The priestess then recites an incantation, saying that the Emperor of the North granted her a talisman to guide her path. With a quick decree, she invokes an energy that envelops her ritual dagger. Soon after, she plunges the blade into the chest of Mayo Sin's body. A wave of energy passes through the corpse, which contorts violently. Mrs. Seok and her escort step back, frightened by the intensity of the ritual. With this, the body of Master Taoist begins to transform. Strangely, his face seems to be covered by several hands. Finally, a column of ghostly hands emerges from the coffin where the body was. Soon, the spectral hands shoot through the night, revealing that the target of the ritual has been found. At high speed, energy crosses the property and directly invades the third son's room. Inside, the sudden presence surprises Blue Spirit and the demonic monk. In an instant, the ghostly hands materialize around the female entity. Soon after, they advance to attack the boy, while the ritual identifies its target, the third son, Ma Gyeongwon. However, the demonic monk steps in front, intercepting the attack of the ghostly hand. With this, an explosion of energy repels the spell, throwing everyone away within the room. Surprised, Blue Spirit questions whether that was a reverse assassination technique. Back in the courtyard, Mrs. Seok realizes that this means that with each blow from the shaman, it will be the third son who feels the pain. Meanwhile, the demon monk is restrained by the hands of the ritual, which now shine with a new energy. The woman then says that just imagining the scene makes her extremely happy. With a new gesture, the shaman prepares to attack once again. Excited, Mrs. Seok demands that she continue, asking for more suffering. Believing it to be the third child being attacked, she repeats with more intensity for the priestess to continue. The shaman then attacks again, and the energy hits the monk once more, while Zhang remains motionless. In ecstasy, the matriarch screams for him to suffer even more. Suddenly, Blue Spirit calls the shaman an inferior creature. Soon after, she releases a wave of energy that hits everyone in the room. The attack completely dispels the ghostly hands that came from the ritual. Furious at the interruption, the entity questions how they dared to interfere. With that, the energy of the ritual is violently repelled back to its origin. She then wonders who dares to meddle with her prey. Immediately, she orders a shaman to step away from her master. A new wave of energy completely destroys the remainder of the spell. Back in the courtyard, New Moon feels the impact of the violent counterattack. Soon, an explosion hits the location of the ritual, throwing everyone away. Worried, Mrs. Seok asks if she is okay, but the priestess falls to the ground, injured. Still in shock, she can hardly believe that her spell was repelled. The shaman then realizes that not only was her reverse assassination deflected, but that her target is not a yellow spirit. With that, she gets up and tells Mrs. Seok that she will need a greater payment for this job. Surprised, the woman asks what she means, and New Moon confirms that she will need at least 1,000 silver niang. Guard Hoang protests, but the shaman asserts that she will now have to risk her life, as the situation was not what she expected. Mrs. Seok then asks if the creature is really that dangerous. She confirms that it is a very high-level evil spirit, much more powerful than a yellow spirit. The shaman explains that a spirit above the yellow level is a disaster, and that only someone with her skill can deal with such a threat. Faced with the revelation, the hostess remains silent, processing the information. Mrs. Seok then agrees to pay another 1,000 to the surprise of her guard. However, she demands that the shaman have a clear plan to get rid of Ma Jiangun. The priestess then reveals that, just like spirits, shamans also have levels of power. She explains that the classifications range from divine to carrier, and that she is 2 levels above Mio Shin, who was just a carrier. She then reveals herself to be of the talent level. The matriarch is shocked to realize that she was deceived, as she thought Mio Shin was much more experienced than that. The revelation leaves her completely speechless. Furthermore, New Moon claims to be one of the only 3 in the Phoenix Pavilion who can directly deal with family spirits. With that, she walks outside and assures that the 3rd child will not survive this confrontation. She then promises that he will never leave alive. Back in the room, Zheng continues meditating while the entity observes and the guard remains fallen on the ground. Blue Spirit complains about the interference, explaining that if Zheng died during the qi circulation, she would have been harmed as well. Suddenly, she is surprised to feel a strange energy emanating from the young man's body. Soon, she identifies the aura as Death Qi and Yin Qi, unable to believe what she is seeing. She then wonders how it is possible for a living person to be accumulating Death Qi. Upon observing him, she concludes that he is definitely not a normal person. She then reflects that, even hating to admit it, he has learned to circulate Qi and is now collecting Death Qi while still alive. While watching him, she admits that he is starting to awaken her interest. Zheng then opens his eyes, looks at his hand, and confirms that his theory was correct. With a smile, he explains that the answer was to circulate the Kai in the opposite direction, and that now the energy no longer dissipates. Not understanding, the entity approaches and asks the mortal if he is sure he is still alive. She then questions how a living human can be capable of attracting Death Qi to themselves. Zheng asks if he shouldn't be able to do this, but she interrupts him before she can respond. Soon after, he finally notices the mess in the room, and the spirit comments that he took a while to notice the situation. Zheng then questions why guard Go-chan is unconscious on the floor, but the entity replies that she is not sure of the reason. Suddenly, the demon monk rises, staring intently at her. When he approaches, the spectral voice screams at the monk, calling him stupid. Soon after, she attacks him furiously, shouting that she thought he was on her side. She then boasts about saving him from a reverse assassination, leaving the young man confused by the term. At that moment, a sinister presence emerges from outside, frightening everyone. Even the entity is surprised by the new threat approaching. The boy asks what that was, but she merely comments that now he has a great dilemma. The boy does not understand what she means by that. Soon, a dark substance begins to seep under the door of the room. As he wonders what kind of person would take that as a familiar spirit, Zheng questions what that thing is. She explains that it is a spirit of the mountains. Then she reveals the name of the creature, a mountain-piercing hoof beast, as the horde advances against them. While explaining, the entity reveals that these mountain and sea spirits are called Chime Morio and are hated for causing disasters. She continues, stating that one of them is exactly the mountain-piercing hoof beast. At that moment, the shaman appears on the scene, accompanied by a small spirit on her shoulder. Next, the newcomer describes that the being in the sky looks like a bird with a snake's tail, a lethal creature that summons insects for chaos. With that, New Moon silently observes the spirit flying over the property. Seeing the insects on the ground, she states that there is no friendship among shamans. The woman continues, saying that perhaps it is because they all dance close to death, but she does not mourn the death of her disciple. However, she admits that it is not pleasant to see a familiar face ruined by an evil spirit. She then walks through the courtyard as the insects stir around her. Soon, she addresses the target directly, calling him by the name of the 3rd son, Mok Gyeongwon. In the sky, the creature seems to react to the call. Then, the shaman orders Mok Gyeongwon to become food for his own spirit. Faced with the imminent threat, Zheng watches the horde of insects advancing against them. In the room, the guard Go-chan continues to sleep deeply, unaware of the danger. Quickly, the young man wakes him with a slap and orders him to wake up. As soon as he wakes, the man panics at the sight of the insects, receiving the warning that it is dangerous and he must keep killing them. Soon after, he screams in pain as he is attacked by one of the insects. He then looks at his hand and asks what is happening upon seeing the marks from the attack. Zheng explains that just touching them for a second will injure him and instructs him to use his internal energy to protect himself. As he panics, The boy realizes that although the insects are small, their enormous quantity will devour them in an instant. With that, the entity asks what he intends to do, since at this rate he will become insect food, and Zhang merely agrees that it seems to be the case. The boy then asks for help from the spiritual companion, but she questions why she would help him, reminding him that she should be his familiar spirit. Soon, the figure says she will consider helping him if he gives her his body, but he refuses and states that then they will all die together. Meanwhile, Go-chan screams desperately that there are too many insects to face. Unexpectedly, the entity interrupts him and proposes that they make a bet, leaving him curious about the suggestion. She then turns, confirming with interest that she accepts to make a bet with him. Next, the entity establishes that if he is on the brink of death, he will lose the bet and have to give her his body. The young man listens attentively to the condition presented, waiting for the rest of the proposal. Soon, the figure completes the bet, promising that if he manages to get out of the situation, she will actively help him from now on. With a challenging tone, he simply replies that she better keep her promise. In response, Blue Spirit exhales smoke, accepting the challenge with an interested look. With a smile, Zhang crushes an insect in his hand and warns his spiritual companion to uphold what was promised. Meanwhile, the guard Go-chan screams in terror at the infestation of insects on the bed. He then warns that there are even more creatures and desperately asks what they should do. The other orders him to find something flammable, as they are going to set the place on fire, leaving him shocked. He then explains that if they start a fire with the lantern, not even all those insects will survive. When the man tries to argue that the lantern is too far away, Jing interrupts him, already preparing to act. He then performs the connection ritual with his hand extended toward the object. With a swift motion, he pulls the lantern from the other side of the room, which flies directly into his hand. Go-chan asks in shock what that was, but the boy says there's no time to explain. While preparing the fire, he wonders who could have done that since it's not a common technique. With a confident smile, he concludes that it must have been Lady Seok. As he sets the sheets on fire, he deduces that the shaman must be with her and decides to use the chaos to his advantage. With fire in hand, Jang reveals his plan with a maniacal smile. He is going to kill the shaman. Outside, New Moon prepares to attack, summoning her mountain-piercing claw beast. Suddenly, a dark energy surges inside the room and extinguishes the flames they had created. Soon after, the same energy advances towards the two, who recoil in fear from the surprise attack. In the hallway, the shaman questions whether he really thought she would let him try that little trick. As she walks among the insects, she simply calls him a fool for his attempt. The shaman then reveals that her right eye, a white eye, can see what others cannot. With that, she explains that what she truly sees is the world of Ki. As she touches the wall, New Moon asserts that no matter what he does, it's impossible to hide from her. She shows the vision her eye grants her, a world of energy where she can locate anyone. She then orders her beast to destroy the place, causing a massive explosion in the room. As the dust settles, New Moon appears before them through the destroyed wall. Even with the opponent's arrival, Jang merely greets her, saying it's a pleasure to meet her. The woman stares at him, not realizing he is connected to an entity by a thread of energy. In front of her surprised gaze, the young man commands his spiritual companion to give him her hand to write a talisman that repels evil spirits. The shaman then invokes a quick decree, launching a powerful attack against the entity. However, she steps on the creature and declares that any resistance is futile. While the guard secretly prepares a dagger, the opponent warns that she can see everything. Without hesitation, the man lunges to attack her with the dagger. Soon, the shaman reveals a talisman and invokes a lightning bolt over the chaotic world. With another quick decree, she strikes him, causing the talisman to attack him in midair. In the air, the guard's dagger falls, but Zheng catches it in a swift motion. Then the woman orders her mountain-piercing claw beast and the insects to kill their target. Thus, she advances with her spirit to attack Zheng, who is lying on the ground. Immediately, the insects surround him from all sides, ready to attack. The horde of creatures then completely covers him in a devastating assault. The crowd stirs over the site of the attack. With the attack concluded, New Moon addresses him, calling him Mok Yangmoon, the third son of the Mok Sword Mansion. She then orders him to cross over to the spirit realm. He is completely submerged by the mass of insects. After the attack, the insects dominate the room while the guard remains unconscious on the bed. The onslaught seems to have defeated both the entity and the subordinate, who falls unconscious. With that, New Moon comments that it was easier than she expected, questioning whether it was a mistake to think it was a green spirit. She then congratulates her familiar spirit, saying it did a great job. Next, the shaman prepares to leave, stating that the enemy will be devoured by the insects if they leave him there. However, as she says that the mission was nothing, she suddenly stops speaking. Soon, the woman is surprised to see a silhouette rising amidst the attack. Through the horde of insects, the young man's hand emerges, resisting the swarm. The shaman turns completely, shocked by what she is witnessing. Before her, Zheng stands, covered in the marks of battle and with his eyes shining intensely. Holding the dagger, he prepares for the next move as his aura intensifies. The opponent takes a step back, visibly frightened by the unexpected turn of events. With the dagger in hand, the warrior raises it in a swift and brutal motion. In a drastic act, he lunges the blade towards his own arm. An aura spreads from him, instantly destroying the insects around. With that, the remaining creatures fall to the ground, defeated by the mysterious energy. Before the scene, New Moon is left speechless, not understanding what happened. She watches the young man, gravely injured and enveloped in a dark aura, and questions what that is. With a disturbing smile, he raises his wounded hand, displaying the result of his act. The woman stares at him, completely terrified by the turn of events. Soon Zheng lunges at her, shouting that it's a shame things have come to this point. With the dagger in hand, he reveals that its essence is a lethal poison, a great way to exterminate insects. In a swift motion, he drops it to the ground before it can react. Fallen, New Moon screams desperately for the name of her mountain-piercing hoof beast. The creature lunges through the air to attack Zheng and protect its mistress. She realizes that she needs the beast to buy time, as she can no longer use the insects and must cast a powerful spell. Quickly, the shaman begins to conjure the spiritual power command method, the first of the 8 thought break techniques. At the same time, the young man turns to face the spell, his eyes glowing menacingly. In response, he invokes his own connection ritual, unleashing a massive wave of dark energy. With a quick movement, Zheng grabs the shaman's creature, which reacts with surprise at being captured. Faced with the scene, New Moon is shocked to see her technique interrupted so abruptly. With a sinister smile, the young man comments that finally the place has become quiet. Desperate, she retreats and screams the name of her beast upon seeing it trapped in the opponent's hands. Suddenly, the woman feels a sharp pain coming from the connection with her spirit. The pain makes her bend over, and she questions the sudden onset of that suffering. Soon, she realizes that the pain of her creature is being transferred to her through the bond they share. With a contorted face, she tries to understand what is happening to the entity. Then she realizes what the enemy is doing as the energy flows from the beast to him. She screams in disbelief upon noticing that he is absorbing all the demonic ki from the creature. Unable to believe it, she explains that this is impossible, as such energy is harmful to living beings. The shaman adds that the essence is filled with yin and death ki, yet the process continues. After absorbing the energy, Zheng observes the being in his hand and admits that this was unexpected. He then explains that he only held it to prevent its charge, but ended up discovering its malignant energy. With a smile, he comments that besides everything, the amount of energy is much greater than he gets from killing people. From the ground, New Moon extends her hand and orders him to stop immediately. Soon she desperately pleads, saying that if he continues, her creature will die. Ignoring her pleas, the young man simply opens a sinister smile. Meanwhile, at Lady Seok's residence, a servant warns that the wind is cold. She suggests that the lady wait inside, but the woman refuses, stating that she cannot do so without knowing what is happening. She then declares that she needs to intervene if something goes out of control, as she had made 2 requests to the shaman. Soon, she reveals that one of the tasks was to kill Mok Gyeongwon, and the other was to obtain the secret manual. With that, she explains that if things go wrong, she must ensure that no one else gets their hands on the manuscript. At that moment, the servant announces that the witch is coming, which surprises her. Quickly, Lady Seok spots the silhouette of the woman approaching. With a look of relief, she concludes that she must have succeeded in her mission. She then celebrates, saying that the Dan Blue spirit is dead and the secret manual is in her possession. With a victorious smile, she declares that her son will now be the master of the mansion. As the servants congratulate her, she reprimands them, telling them not to rush. Suddenly, the shaman stops walking toward her, leaving Lady Seok confused by the pause. With a doubtful expression, she and the maids watch the woman standing at a distance. Then, Lady Seok asks what happened and orders New Moon to come closer to tell her. In a formal gesture, the shaman bows and shouts toward the Grand First Madame. In a loud voice, she announces that the Phoenix Pavilion cannot kill young Master Mok Gyeongwon. The unexpected declaration leaves Lady Seok and her servants completely shocked. Unable to believe it, Lady Seok can only whisper a what. At that moment, New Moon remembers having called Zheng a cunning bastard, the very demon for forcing her to do this. She then recalls when Zheng ordered her to expose Lady Seok with her own words. He then reminded her that he would do anything for her spirit and that exposing Lady Seok was the only way out. With that, Zheng explains that this way, the Phoenix Pavilion and Lady Seok would become enemies. New Moon then realizes that she has become a traitor to the Phoenix Pavilion, but concludes that she has no other choice. Soon she screams to everyone that it was Lady Seok who said that young Master Mok was possessed. She concludes by revealing that the request was to kill the young master, but he is not possessed. The shaman then asks that no one ever makes such a request to the Pavilion of the Phoenix again. With that, screams spread through the courtyard, with everyone wondering if Lady Seok really wants her third child dead. Immediately, an order from the master of the outer hall echoes, commanding everyone to go to the Hall of the Flower of Blessing and arrest Lady Seok. Soon, her maidservants panic and warn her that the martial artists from the outer hall are approaching. With a face twisted in hatred, Lady Seok can only repeat the name Mok Gyeongwon. As the confusion about what happened in the Hall of the Flower of Blessing spreads, the shaman quietly steps away from the scene. Shortly after, Jeng appears on the balcony and asks if she did exactly as he instructed. He then displays the small creature in his hand, which writhes in agony with its energy diminished. In light of the commotion in the background, New Moon confirms that yes, as he can see. With this, the shaman realizes that, in the end, everything turned out as he wanted, turning Lady Seok into a villain and enemy of the Pavilion of the Phoenix. Soon, she remembers that she cannot worry about that, as she was the one who betrayed her clan to save her spirit and will now be pursued forever. Deciding that it is time to leave, she extends her hand and demands that he return her spirit as promised. However, Jing interrupts her and says that before doing that, there is something else. With a smile, he reveals that he would like to ask her something first. Surprised, the shaman questions if he wants her to tell him about the Chime Morio. He confirms, saying he wants to know about people who control spirits like the monk and the creature, especially about the Pavilion of the Phoenix. Looking at the entity, New Moon confirms that it was not a possession and wonders how he turned such a resentful spirit into his familiar. Moreover, she notices something even more concerning about the situation. With her special eye, she sees that he possesses one more energy core. Then Jang brings the creature closer to her and asks if she really does not want to tell him what she knows. With no other option, the shaman agrees to reveal what she knows. After a moment of silence, she explains that there are 6 levels for the Chime Morio. She then lists the first 4 categories: Ominous Beast, Strange Beast, Mythical Beast, and Demonic Beast. Next, she continues with the last 2, Sacred Beast and Divine Beast, explaining that even the lowest level already represents a disaster. Soon, the shaman reveals that the Pavilion of the Phoenix has 3 people, including herself, who can control these beasts as spirit familiars. She explains that one of them is Go, who assists the master of the hall and controls a cataclysmic strange beast called Gu Diao. The other, according to her, is the master of the Pavilion of the Phoenix himself, who possesses one of the highest level Chime Morio. With this, Jung questions whether the master spirit would be a sacred beast or a divine beast. New Moon denies, explaining that these categories only exist in legends and believes he is a mythical or demonic beast. Then the shaman hands him a book on the subject, which he accepts with a simple thank you. As he flips through the book, Jang reflects on the power of the Pavilion Master, imagining that he possesses a divine beast. With a smile, he comments that it would be nice to have a high-level Chime Morio for himself. Soon, he fulfills his part of the agreement and says she did a good job before returning the spirit. Noticing that she did not thank him, Jang teases her, asking her to say thank you louder. As soon as she thanks him, he dismisses her, saying she can leave, making the guard Go-chan uncomfortable with his personality. With her weakened spirit in hand, the shaman New Moon departs from the location. Observing the scene, Jung comments with a smile that it was a lucky day. He reflects that Lady Seok will no longer be able to do anything, as she will now be watched by everyone. Then he realizes that the key absorbed from the beast is enough to create an energy core. With the newly acquired power, he concludes that he will now be able to learn martial arts. Beside him, the guard Go-chan asks if he is sure everything will be fine. Go-chan explains that the shaman is probably harboring resentment against him, but Jang simply says that a promise is a promise. Even with the guard questioning whether he is not afraid of revenge, Jang seems unconcerned. Soon he asserts that he does not believe she will be able to do anything, leaving the guard confused. Jang then warns that it is now Go-chan's turn to fulfill his part of the promise. Meanwhile, New Moon moves away from the mansion, reflecting on the condition of her spirit. She observes the creature and thinks she wouldn't be surprised that it died at that moment. With resentment, the shaman whispers the name Mok Gyeongwon while holding onto her spirit. She promises herself that she will retreat for now, but that she will return soon. Suddenly, a voice echoes, commenting that the shaman seems to be promising revenge. An invisible attack hits the shaman, causing her to fall to the ground as her hat flies away. Gasping, New Moon recognizes the sensation and realizes it was exactly what she feared. With her injured eye, she identifies the technique as reverse assassination and refuses to believe what is happening. She shrinks back in fear as she feels the presence of the being that attacked her. Soon, it is revealed that the voice belongs to the blue spirit, who now hovers over New Moon in its spirit form. With a smile, the blue spirit comments that she is still beautiful, even with one eye less. The shaman stares at her in shock, unable to respond to the injury on her face. Then something begins to emerge from the wound in her eye. New Moon panics as she realizes she can no longer breathe. Meanwhile, Lady Seok screams that she has been wronged by the master of the outer hall. She continues, accusing that child of plotting against her and questioning if he would believe that. Finally, she insists that the shaman and the third son are together to incriminate her. With a bang on the table, the master of the outer hall orders silence, causing Lady Seok to fall silent. With a serious expression, the master of the outer hall, Sang Wongbak, repeats the order for Lady Seok to be quiet. He then questions what the confusion in the medicinal hall was about, and she responds that it occurred due to the forbidden entry into the master's hall. Soon, Sang Wongbak presses her, asking if, in fact, she was not trying to kill the master of the mansion. Indignant at the accusation, Lady Seok screams the name of the master of the outer hall. She glares at him with a look of fury at the insinuation. The master, however, remains impassive in the face of her reaction. He then states that he cannot ignore the incident and that an investigation will be conducted, asking for her cooperation. Lady Seok remains silent, unable to respond. He then assures her that he will conduct a fair investigation, analyzing everything carefully. Sang Wongbak reveals that he will investigate not only her and the second son, but also the third. He concludes by confirming that the third son will also be the target of the investigation. Night falls over the mansion, bringing a tense calm to the place. Already in his quarters, the master of the outer hall reflects on the case. He wonders why both the second son and Lady Seok tried to kill the third son. The master considers that, although the power struggle makes sense, there would be no more reason to go after the third son, who is incapacitated. Soon he begins to wonder if perhaps there is a hidden reason for wanting the boy's death, something he is unaware of. Recalling the interrogation, he realizes that the young man did not act as usual, as he was previously extremely arrogant. Initially, Sang Wongbak thought he was just in shock from the near-death experience, or that he had become more restrained. However, now he feels that something about the situation seems very wrong. Faced with suspicion, the master decides that he has no choice but to investigate the matter himself. Meanwhile, back in the room, Jang meditates under the watchful eye of the demonic monk, while Go Chan is asleep in a chair nearby. Suddenly, the blue spirit materializes in the room, surprising the demonic monk. Fully manifested, the spirit questions what is happening in the scene she has just encountered. As she approaches Zhang, she comments, impressed, about his appearance. Then, the blue spirit admits that she did not expect him to be able to absorb so much ki from the mountain-piercing beast. She also recalls that she found his idea of using death ki to create a core interesting, considering now that it might actually be possible. Even so, the blue spirit begins to think of a caveat. She moves closer to observe better and comments that he doesn't look so bad, until the boy opens his eyes. Surprised by the proximity, Jang immediately questions her about what she is doing. Visibly nervous, the blue spirit turns and denies doing anything. With a teasing smile, Jang asks if what she said is really true. The question catches her off guard, leaving her speechless. Completely embarrassed, she shouts for him to stop with the nonsense and focus on circulating his kai. Then the spirit laments having accepted the bet and grumbles that shaman should have done a better job. Jang then remembers something he needs to check. He wants to confirm if what he created is indeed the energy core she was talking about. With disdain, the blue spirit doubts that a core can be formed in just one day, but says he must keep trying. Then Jang reveals his energy core and asks if that is not exactly what she described. Completely shocked by what she sees, the blue spirit can only question what that is. Not believing it, she asks for permission to take a look, and the boy agrees immediately. The spirit then explains that she will place her hand over his core and materialize just the tips of her fingers to touch it, asking him to hold on tight. However, as soon as she touches the spot, something unexpected happens. Confused by the situation, Jang asks what she is doing. The blue spirit reveals that her hand cannot pass through the core, and he asks why this is happening. Irritated, she shouts that she doesn't know the reason and orders the demon monk to try in her place. As the two examine Zheng, she asks if he has any idea what might be happening, but Zheng replies that he is not sure. Soon, the spirit begins to wonder if the problem lies in the fact that she is now a familiar spirit. She remains silent, trying to understand the situation, while Go Chan continues to sleep deeply. To test, she uses the same ability on the sleeping guard, and upon realizing it works on him, confirms that the problem is not with her. In light of Go Chan's exaggerated reaction, the blue spirit comments that he is being very dramatic. As soon as she says the problem is not with her, Jang asks if there is another way to check the core. With a mysterious look, the spirit replies that in fact, there is another way. Jung and the demon monk stare at her in silence, waiting attentively for the answer. However, the conversation is suddenly interrupted by a voice from outside the room. The voice asks if the young master is sleeping and introduces itself as Sang Wonbak, the master of the outer hall. Jung finds the visit strange and wonders what the master of the outer hall would want with him so late at night. He describes him as one of the most loyal subordinates of the Mock Sword Mansion, serving the family for 2 generations. Because of his strong convictions and the trust of the elders, it is said that even Mrs. Siak cannot do anything against him. Having the greatest influence in the mansion, Sang Wonbak enters the room and states that he knew Zheng was awake. The master then asks what he desires, and Zheng begins to respond, saying that he would like to say something first. Before he can finish, Sang Wonbak bows and apologizes, taking the blame for what happened even with the protection of his men. Zheng tries to say that it's all right and that he doesn't need to worry, but the master insists on apologizing. With a calm smile, the boy raises his hand and assures him that he is completely fine. Sang Wonbak observes Jung with a watchful and suspicious look. Then, the master tries to approach the boy and begins to ask if he could examine him. Jung simply watches him, not understanding the intention behind that gesture. Suddenly, Sang Wonbak laughs and says he is glad he said that, while using his energy to examine him. Soon after, the master asks where the self-defense dagger he gave to each young master is when the mansion leader fell unconscious. After a moment of silence, Sang Wonbak questions him if he happened to lose it. Jun replies that he remembers and that he kept it in a drawer in the cabinet, relieving the master. With a smile, Sang Wonbak says he would be sad if he had lost it, and the two laugh together. However, the boy interrupts him to talk about the dagger, and the master promptly responds for him to continue. With a sly smile, Zheng states that as much as he thinks about it, he does not remember receiving such an object. Sang Wonbak reveals that this happens because, in fact, he never gave him a dagger. Before the master could hit him, Zheng jumps back, escaping the attack. Then Sang Wonbak states that he made 2 mistakes. First, the master reveals that the third young master always became arrogant when others acted like subordinates. He remembers that after being defeated by the 4th young master, the real boy would become terrified. Moreover, the 3rd young master always backed down when it seemed like they were going to hit him. However, Sang Wonbak points out that he was too lenient and did not back down at all. With that, the master shouts that he has seized his meridian and that now he will not be able to move anymore. He then demands that the impostor confess where the real young master is. Immobile, Jung's body begins to fall backward. At the last second, however, he stops the fall with his foot, surprising everyone. Not understanding, Sang Wonbak can only ask what is happening. With a frightening smile, Zheng simply invokes the blue spirit. Soon after, a hand pierces the master's chest, and he screams in pain. Agonizing, he wonders what happened to his heart. Emerging behind him, the spirit threatens him, saying that he is just begging to be killed. With the master immobilized, Zheng praises the blue spirit, saying she is as skilled as he expected. The spirit then understands and explains that since the key of life and the key of death are opposites, the energy he used to bind the meridian has dispersed. She then confirms that the mortal has indeed managed to form an energy core. The blue spirit comments that a body resistant to acupuncture, without immense internal energy, is very interesting. She then questions him about what he will do now that he has been discovered, and Zheng admits he did not expect to be exposed this way. Soon after, Zheng smiles, already having an idea of what to do. He turns to the demonic monk and orders him to possess him. Upon hearing the command, the blue spirit comments that he is basically a demon. Not understanding, Sang Wonbak questions who Zheng is talking to and what this possession order means. Suddenly, the master's body begins to convulse as the possession starts. In his mind, he despairs upon realizing that the person identical to the young master is resistant to acupuncture. Completely dominated by the demonic monk, Sang Wonbak asks who he really is. With a calm smile, Zheng simply replies that he is the 3rd young master of the Mock Sword Mansion. The next morning, a new day begins to dawn over the Mock Sword Mansion. Upon waking and walking through the hall, Go-chan feels that something is very strange. He remembers that the bed was destroyed and that the guards of the outer hall, who previously treated him like a criminal, are now much more polite. To his surprise, one of the guards greets him and informs him that the young master is waiting for him. Not understanding, Go-chan stammers a response while trying to process what is happening. Soon, the bedroom door opens and he steps back, completely shocked by the scene. Inside the room, Sang Wonbak is standing next to Zheng, who greets him, saying he has arrived. Then the boy dismisses the master of the outer hall, who agrees to leave. As he passes by Go-chan, Sang Wonbak bows in a gesture of respect, leaving him even more confused. He watches the master leave until Zheng invites him to have breakfast, saying he arrived at a good time. Startled, Go-chan stammers and asks what is happening, and the boy replies that he will explain later, inviting him to sit down. With that, he sits down nervously, and Zheng warns that he has something to ask him. While they eat, the boy asks Go Chan to teach him the basics of the martial arts of the Mock Sword Mansion. Speechless, Go Chan chokes upon hearing the request. The scene then returns to the moment of the confrontation the night before. Back in the present, Zheng trains confused, commenting that this is strange. He wonders why his movements are not connecting, even though he is sure he did exactly what the secret manual indicated. Observing him, the blue spirit explains that this is an advanced technique. She continues by saying that the movements are for a higher level of martial arts, and he asks if that is not a good thing. Irritated, she calls him stupid and asserts that one cannot understand advanced martial arts without mastering the basics. The blue spirit details that what he is trying to learn is a technique for a higher level, which helps to surpass the current threshold. With that, she explains that the technique removes useless movements to increase efficiency, but it is useless without having the fundamentals. Faced with the explanation, Zheng understands that he will not be able to advance without first mastering the basics. Back in the present, Go Chan is astonished and asks if his goal is to become the master of the mansion, but Zheng denies it immediately. When he asks why, Zheng says he just thought it would be useful. The guard reveals that the technique is incredible and known throughout the Murim. Even with the guard warning that learning that could be a problem, Zheng simply says he will keep everything a secret. To Go Chan's despair, with a sigh, Go Chan states that he cannot teach him, and the boy asks why. He then confesses that he does not know the technique as the basic martial arts of the mansion are exclusive to them. The guard explains that the techniques are restricted and taught only to those with the surname Mok and who are part of the family lineage. Upon hearing this, Zheng realizes that the people who know these techniques are, in fact, his own brothers. Go Chan confirms that only the master of the mansion and the young masters know these techniques. Soon, the boy asks if they are the only ones, and Go Chan confirms that they are. With this, the guard realizes that the situation is dire, as Zheng is an enemy of the other young masters and is at great risk for not being a Mok. Suddenly, Zheng stands up and states that, in that case, he has no other choice. He then simply orders them to leave, and Go Chan nervously asks where they are going. The boy replies that they are going after someone who can teach him these techniques, leaving the guard shocked. Even with Go Chan worried that this will raise suspicions, Zheng asserts that he won't be able to do anything if he lives in fear of being discovered. Go Chan begins to ask who they will look for, but stops mid-sentence upon realizing the terrible answer. The guard understands that the target can only be the person who was training in the courtyard. In disbelief, Go Chan realizes they are heading towards the youngest of the brothers, the fourth young master. As they approach, both observe the fourth young master training in silence. Desperate, Go Chan tries to stop Zheng from getting closer, shouting for him to wait. He reminds him of the incident where the real young master was assaulted for insulting his mother, questioning why he would approach him anyway. With a sigh, the guard admits that the memories of that day are still very vivid. In his memory, the young master was screaming and begging for them to stop while he was being beaten. Go Chan continues, recalling that the youngest truly hates the third young master and left him severely injured that day. Moreover, he warns that the boy is a monster who reached the highest level of martial arts at just 16 years old. Watching him from afar, the blue spirit comments that he certainly seems very useful, while Zheng asks if she can perceive that. She explains that there are not many with an aura like his, calling him a genius and saying she would have accepted him as a disciple. Then the woman warns him to be careful, as his powers are limited while the sun is in the sky. With that, Go Chan suggests they give up, but is startled to see that Zheng is already approaching the courtyard. While training, the fourth young master stops and concentrates, sensing someone's presence. Suddenly, he comes face to face with Zheng's shadow standing right in front of him. The young warrior reacts immediately, assuming a combat stance. With a smile, Zheng simply greets him while holding Go Chan, who shrinks back in fear. Unfazed, the fourth young master orders him to leave or he will receive another beating. However, he stops mid-sentence, shocked by what he sees. Confused, he can only ask, "You?" Soon, the fourth young master questions how Zheng managed to get that, while the boy reveals the secret book. With a victorious smile, Zheng finally asks if he doesn't want the book. While the fourth young master doubts its authenticity, Zheng invites him to check for himself. Without hesitation, the young warrior takes the book from his hand. He soon becomes completely shocked as he flips through the first pages. He recognizes that it is real and contains the master's secret to advancing in martial arts. However, upon closer inspection, he realizes that something is missing from the pages. He then asks where the torn pages are, and Zheng simply points to his own head. Irritated, he inquires where that bastard got the book. The boy replies that the origin doesn't matter, but the fact that he now possesses it does. The fourth young master shouts furiously, questioning why he came there. He accuses Zheng of wanting to declare himself the new master and of telling him to give up on his dreams. Out of patience, he orders them to leave immediately. Ignoring his fury, Zhang simply drops the book and states that there seems to be a misunderstanding. He then says he is there to negotiate, as he doesn't care at all about becoming the master of the mansion. Surprised, the young warrior can only question what he said. With an ironic smile, Zhang asks if it is true that his brother is not interested in being the master of the mansion. As soon as Zhang asks if he doesn't believe it, a quick punch comes flying towards him. Soon after, the fourth young master strikes him with a powerful blow that sends him flying backward. Seeing the scene, Go-chan screams desperately for the young master. With his fist enveloped in energy, the young warrior asks if Zhang really thought he would believe that. He says that since it seems his brother has forgotten what happened 2 years ago, he will help him remember. With a furious look, he asserts that he will do this so that the other never tries anything against him again. Fallen on the ground, Zhang simply wipes the marks of the blow from his face. Even with a marked face, a sinister smile appears on his face. The boy reflects that the man with the black sword is out of the question as a comparison. He then remembers other experienced martial artists like Guard Cam and the Master of the Outer Hall. Finally, he understands why Go-chan was being so dramatic. Faced with his brother's strength, Zhang concludes that he is truly a monster. Sitting on the ground, the boy admits that his reaction time cannot keep up with that speed and wonders if he can become that strong by learning martial arts. He composes himself and acknowledges that his brother has a powerful punch. The fourth young master repeats the words, not understanding the compliment. Ignoring the threat, Zhang says he thinks it's natural for his brother not to trust him. The brother grabs him by the collar and immediately agrees. He states that he does not intend to believe a single word that comes out of his mouth. With a smile, Zhang asks if that is really true and laments the situation. He then threatens him, saying he will hand over the secret manual to Lady Seok or to the second brother. The threat infuriates the young warrior, who prepares to attack again. While holding his arm, Zhang provokes him, questioning whether the other two brothers would let him live in peace. To finish, he reminds him that the brother was the most beloved successor candidate by the master of the mansion. Furious, the fourth young master shouts, asking if he is threatening him. Zhang coldly replies that his life depends on it, and asks if that doesn't sound like a threat. The young warrior is left speechless, shocked, as suspicion begins to arise in his mind. He releases his brother's arm and asks who he really is. Without averting his gaze, he continues questioning whether this is really the true Mak Gyeongwon. The question leaves Go-chan terrified in the background. Zhang responds with disdain, asking who else he could be. Confused, the younger brother questions what he means. Zhang accuses him of speaking as if he knows everything about him. The brother scoffs at the idea of not knowing him. He recalls that he attacked him 2 years ago, and that since then the real brother has always run away in fear of him. Zhang interrupts him and asks what else he knows besides that. He then confronts him directly, questioning what he really knows, besides the fact that they are half-brothers and the incident from 2 years ago. Zhang continues, asking if the brother knows what he likes, what he thinks, or why he doesn't want to become the master of the mansion. With a clenched fist, the fourth young master tries to react, but stops mid-sentence. Suddenly, he explodes and shouts, asking if they know him, since they have always treated him like an inferior bastard child. He questions why Zhang sought him out to negotiate instead of going after the better brothers, who never acknowledged him. Calmly, the boy replies that the reason is simple, because the younger brother is the best of all. Completely taken aback, the young warrior asks, astonished, what he said. He remains silent, trembling as he tries to process the unexpected compliment. Soon, he remembers how he has always been insulted and excluded because of his origins, feeling lonely and isolated. He reflects on all the years of training, hoping to be recognized by someone. Then he realizes that the person he had been waiting for is right there in front of him. He thinks he expected to be hated because of what happened 2 years ago. Looking up at the sky, he questions whether this means he also needs to change. After a sigh, he composes himself and says that it's okay, to Go-chan's surprise. Finally, he faces Zhang and declares that he will listen to what he has to say about the negotiation. With a satisfied smile, the boy agrees and begins to explain what he wants. A new day begins to dawn over the mansion, marking the end of the negotiation. After the agreement, Zhang and Go-chan walk silently through the courtyard. Go-chan admits to himself that what the young master did was simply incredible. He reflects that he did not expect that approach, but understands that Zhang needed a plan since the true young master mastered martial arts. Back to the negotiation, the boy states that he has 3 requirements for his brother. He asks to be left alone and to receive financial support, questioning if the brother can promise that. Mak Yuchun agrees and asks what the 3rd requirement is. With a smile, Zhang reveals the last request, acting as if it were the least important after the other priorities. He asks for the basic martial arts of the mansion, leading Go-chan worried that the direct request could expose him. However, the younger brother simply asks if he forgot, without suspecting anything, exactly as Zhang planned. To gain the brother's trust, Zhang validated his thirst for recognition, making him doubt nothing. Thus, Makyuchen began to teach the basic martial arts to Zheng without questioning anything. While the genius Makyuchen took 2 hours to memorize the manual, Zheng learned everything by listening just once. Back in the present, Go-chan praises the young master, admitting that it was good to have finished alongside him, even if it wasn't what he expected. He continues to be impressed, lamenting the loss of the manual, but Zheng responds indifferently, saying he doesn't care at all. In a reserved tone, Go-chan reveals that he didn't even teach the technique correctly to him. Zheng stops walking, surprised, and asks what he means. After a brief pause, Go-chan decides to tell the truth. He explains that he taught the technique in an altered way, changing parts every 13 or 14 characters. With a satisfied smile, Zheng admits that he was afraid of being discovered, but managed to escape. Terrified, Go-chan realizes that an altered manual could incapacitate someone or even cause death due to key deviation. Indifferently, Zheng asks what the problem would be. Intimidated, Go-chan stammers that it is nothing, absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, in a distant pavilion, night falls. In a dark place, a mysterious shaman named Reflection waits in silence. Suddenly, he strikes the ground with his staff, reacting to a presence. Soon, the master of the Phoenix Pavilion appears and comments that they haven't heard from New Moon. He explains that she failed the mission and even betrayed Mrs. Seok, severing ties with the clan. The master laments that the pavilion's image has also been harmed by the failure. Without hesitation, he turns to his disciple, Reflection, and orders him to find New Moon immediately. He concludes the order by demanding that the truth be revealed to restore the pavilion's reputation. Reflection accepts the mission without hesitation and sets off to fulfill his duty. Far away, Reflection crosses a mountain range in search of answers about the recent events. Soon, he finds New Moon's hat and bracelet discarded on the ground, marked by the traces of an intense battle. The shaman approaches, noticing traces of dark energy permeating the area. Carefully, he uses a talisman to initiate an investigation ritual. During the ritual, Reflection recognizes that New Moon was one of the most powerful shamans of the pavilion, but met a tragic end. He confirms his suspicion. Something very wrong happened there. Invoking the authority of the Key of the North, the shaman declares that he will reveal everything that occurred in that place. With a swift decree, he materializes the events of the past before his eyes. The ritual works, and Reflection begins to witness the confrontation in detail. The vision reveals how New Moon was completely dominated by Zheng's force and his entity. He observes the shaman stating that she would temporarily retreat, but promising to return to finish the confrontation. Surprised, the shaman assimilates the truth about her defeat. Suddenly, the presence of the blue spirit manifests, touching his face during the ritual. The spirit reveals itself completely, enveloping Reflection in a dark and powerful aura. Paralyzed by shock, the shaman remains still in front of the revelation. When the vision ends, he falls silent, trying to process everything he saw. Breathless, Reflection clearly identifies the presence of the blue spirit. With a serious expression, he seems to reach an important conclusion. He states that he will need to prepare himself in the best way for what he discovered to be the Gu Diao. The scene shifts to the courtyards of the Wooden Sword Hall. There, the blue spirit observes something with a thoughtful expression. Nearby, a martial arts manual is open, displaying fundamental techniques. With impressive speed, Zheng practices the movements described in the book. He executes a basic stance with perfection and energy. Soon after, he moves with an agility that seems to bring the illustrations of the manual to life. The boy throws a simple punch, releasing a powerful wave of energy. Surprised, the blue spirit questions what is happening. She reflects that normally one would repeat the basic movements countless times to perfect them. She observes that, besides the first form, he hasn't made a single mistake. She concludes that he just needs to continue building muscle strength, as he seems not to need to practice the techniques. Amazed, she admits that it is not an exaggeration to call him a genius. Soon after, she confesses to herself that she hoped he would beg for lessons, but had no intention of teaching him. Even so, the blue spirit thinks that if he begged, she might consider the idea. Suddenly, startled by her own thoughts, she screams, leaving Zheng completely confused. Shortly after, Go-chan approaches and tells the young master that he came because he heard he wanted to see him. Zheng confirms and warns that he wanted to ask him a favor, leaving the guard curious. The scene shifts to the bustling Jiangning County. There, inside the Eternal Orchid Pavilion, Go-chan appears thoughtful. With a curious expression, he observes a paper with a symbol and wonders what it could be. In a memory, the guard questions the meaning of the symbol, and Zheng responds that it is something he is looking for, asking him to record a search. Go-chan reflects that this is the only intelligence organization in the region, but also the least skilled. Suddenly, he stops and wonders why he is so concerned about this. With a sigh, he laments having become a loyal dog and questions when that happened. Despite everything, he admits to himself that he doesn't really care, as he has no goal in life. Go-chan remembers how he was abandoned and raised as an assassin, but forced to retire due to lack of talent. He recalls that around the same time, he joined the Cam Guard, who also treated him merely as a tool. He concludes that even if Zhang treats him this way, the fault lies with him for not being good at anything. Accepting his fate, he thinks that he just lives life as it flows and will be abandoned again when he is useless. Still, he acknowledges that his life now is better than before, as the other guards take care of the extra work. Although he worries about Zheng's activities and the threat of poison, he admits there are many downsides. Even so, he sighs and decides that he will only do what he has been ordered. Suddenly, the pavilion owner, Wak, enters the room laughing loudly, surprising the guard. With a wide smile, the man apologizes for making him wait. Go Chen realizes that he is already drunk, but decides that the best course is to just deliver the order. He is surprised to see the owner sit next to a young woman. Before he can ask, Wak introduces the girl as the newcomer to the pavilion. With a suggestive smile, he asks what Go Chan thinks, wanting to know if the young woman is not beautiful. Wak then explains that the mission is for an important person and orders him to send the girl. With a serious look, Go Chan listens to Wak's order to send the girl immediately. Then the pavilion owner pushes the girl forward, telling her to proceed with the mission. Shortly after, he turns to the client and warns him to wait, treating it as a reminder. Irritated, Go Chan bangs on the table and shouts for him to stop the distractions and focus on what really matters. Suddenly, the girl turns and delivers a hard slap to Wak's face. The unexpected blow freezes both the owner and Go Chan. Relieved, the disguised young man sighs and reveals his identity, saying he can't take it anymore. Furious, Wak insults him with all his might. Without hesitation, the girl grabs him by the hair and slams his head against the table. Then she lifts him off the ground, holding him firmly by the hair. With a cruel smile, she throws him over the chairs. Shocked, Go Chan draws his weapon, shouting, not understanding what is happening. Before he can react, the girl attacks him using the table as a weapon. Terrified, Go Chan curses as he realizes he is in trouble. With a cold smile, the assassin calls him low-level assassin number 86. Suddenly, several needles immobilize Go Chan, who recognizes the technique with shock. With the situation under control, the woman observes the paralyzed guard before her. Turning around, she expresses disappointment that he did not recognize her, repeating the number 86. Finally, with a smile, she introduces herself, Hacharan, one of the leaders of the Flying Assassins sect. Completely shocked, Go Chan stutters, recognizing her as the only granddaughter of his former master. The guard then remembers the sect's final test, which required the completion of 100 kills. He recalls that this was the necessary ritual to become the leader of the Flying Assassins sect. Moreover, the winner would receive a secret weapon called the Needle of Sharp Benevolence. Back in the present, Go Chan concludes that, since she possesses the needle, it means she is now the leader of the sect. Completely shocked, he refuses to believe this reality. He remembers that despite her talent, her personality had always been a significant problem. He recalls how many doubted her, considering her a little arrogant troublemaker. Still in shock, he wonders when she grew up so much. Hacharan announces that she is done as she removes the needle from her hat, causing him to step back. Now free, he admits he did not expect to reunite with her in this way. He greets her hesitantly, but is corrected to call her the leader of the sect. With a proud smile, she confirms her position, while he wonders if her personality has changed. Suddenly, she questions him if he treats her this way because he is retired. Terrified, he denies it, but thinks that he had to beg and question her change again. The young woman says that, in any case, this is good, leaving Go Chan kneeling and confused. Hacharan reveals that she was waiting for the first child of the mock sword hall, but now she can simply bring him in her place. She explains that she received information about the number 29 intermediate assassin. The guard reacts in horror upon hearing that number. The assassin continues, informing him that the cam guard failed in an assassination mission. Go Chan remains tense and silent in the face of the revelation. She considers the guard missing and laments her failure, reinforcing that the sect's golden rule is to always complete the mission. Soon, Hacharan reveals the true reason for her presence, to take the head of the third son of the Mock Sword Hall. She concludes by stating that she will do this at any cost, leaving Go Chan completely terrified. The scene returns to the wooden sword hall, now under the light of the sunset. Blue Spirit continues to watch Zhang as he trains tirelessly. Suddenly, she loses patience and shouts, asking how long he intends to keep going. The boy stops training and agrees while she watches him with disdain. Zhang then invites her to dinner. A mysterious smile forms on her lips. As night finally falls over the hall, the maid possessed by Blue Spirit enjoys dinner with great enthusiasm. Beside her, Zhang reads a book attentively, ignoring the sounds of the meal. Suddenly, the maid exclaims that it is perfect, catching the boy's attention. He asks if it is that good, and she confirms while drinking. Soon she states that one of life's greatest joys is eating. With a smile, Blue Spirit says she is sure he will understand one day. Zhang then reflects that she has possessed the maid for a few days and seems to enjoy the experience, wondering if he should have done this from the start. Suddenly, the maid's body begins to reject the spirit, and she drops the cork from the bottle. The woman complains that the body can't handle even 15 minutes. While Zheng remembers how she almost destroyed another maid before, he concludes that a normal body cannot withstand a spirit of such high level. In her spiritual form, Blue Spirit comments that he is very interested in shamanism. Surprised, Zheng looks at the book he is reading, titled Six-Person Spirit Invocation Technique. He admits that the book is interesting, explaining that it was what caught his attention the most. With a focused gaze, he wonders if the spirit of a deceased person can be invoked. Thus, he continues reading, completely concentrated on the shamanism book. Suddenly, Zheng turns around startled, surprising Blue Spirit with his reaction. She comments, smiling, that his senses have become very sharp. The boy remains silent with a serious expression. The scene returns to the room where Go-chan is with the assassin. He hands her the clothes and informs her that this is the maid's uniform. Without hesitation, Hei-cheran complains that the clothes are ugly, leaving the guard speechless. Immediately, Go-chan realizes that the situation is very bad. In a panic, he concludes that this is terrible. He despairs, imagining that she will kill him as soon as she finds out that he betrayed guard Cam. Determined to warn Zheng about her, he says he will wait outside while she changes. With a teasing smile, Hei-cheran asks why he doesn't want to watch, leaving him completely shocked. She provokes him, saying that an opportunity like that is rare. Go-chan is left speechless, totally embarrassed by her proposal. Suddenly, the woman starts laughing and reveals that she was just joking. Even so, she thanks him, explaining that she managed to get in easily thanks to his help. Trying to get out of the situation, Go-chan lies and says he also wanted to avenge his older brother. Excited, Hei-cheran says it's like having an army by her side and praises him for still being a loyal assassin. With a serious look, she states that she trusted him. The guard tries to change the subject and move away, but suddenly he is hit by several needles. Then she appears behind him with a smile, asking if that was what he expected her to say. As she approaches, Hei-cheran explains that if he did nothing, it means his loyalty has changed. With that, the assassin humiliates him, saying it is funny to see him pretend, as he is nothing but useless. Completely shocked, the guard realizes that she knew everything from the beginning. The young woman mocks him, stating that he hasn't changed at all and remains as stupid and pathetic as ever. With a cold look, she questions whether he knows the concept of learning. Finally, Hei-cheran concludes that incorrigible people like him should just die. With a clenched fist, the guard wonders where things went wrong. He soon admits to himself that he knows the real reason. In despair, he concludes that all of this happens because he is weak. With a knife to his neck, the assassin gives him an order. The story will be that he left after avenging guard Cam. In the end, she bids farewell with a smile, and Go-chan accepts that this is how he will die. Suddenly, a hand emerges in the middle of the room, executing the 8 techniques of thought break attachment ritual. The hand intercepts the knife at the last second, enveloping the assassin with an energy that leaves her shocked. Then, she firmly grabs the weapon. Soon after, Zheng enters the room with a powerful kick that breaks the door. His sudden appearance leaves both the assassin and the guard completely unresponsive. With a smile, the boy turns and calls for guard Go-chan. In tears, the guard looks at him, thinking for the first time that he feels happy. Zheng smiles and asks if he was in danger, while Go-chan concludes that this demon is cool. Suddenly, the young Hei-cheran grabs the guard by the collar, using him as a hostage. Then she holds him immobilized with a knife to his neck. Therefore, the assassin warns the young master to stay still, unless he wants to see his guard die. Meanwhile, Zheng silently stares at them, creating a tense atmosphere in the room. The guard then realizes that he has been investigated by her, but notes that the information about him being terrible at martial arts is incorrect. Thus, he imagines how shocked she must be to see him use advanced skills like telekinesis. At that moment, Go-chan assumes that the woman believes she is facing a peak martial artist. However, he knows that she could not know the truth. Soon, he remembers that this demon has no heart, and still that he is someone who does not care about the lives of others. Thus, Zheng advances without caring about the threat. Desperate, the guard thinks he is going to die, while the boy prepares to throw the knife. With a quick motion, the weapon is thrown and embeds itself in the ground. The blade stuck in the wood leaves both the assassin and the hostage completely confused. With a cold look, the young master then orders her to let him go. Completely stunned, Hei-cheran questions what he meant by that order. Even so, he proposes to let her go if she releases the guard, but clarifies that he has only changed his mind about him. With an unexpected smile, the boy warns that it would be a loss if the guard died and suggests that she take the opportunity to leave. Surprised, Go-chan wonders if that demon is really trying to save him. Meanwhile, the tension in the room increases and everyone stares at each other in silence. With a mocking smile, the woman wonders if she heard the order to let him go correctly. Furious, she questions how he dares, reminding him that she is the leader of the Flying Assassin sect. Next, she presses the knife against the guard's neck and says that if he wants to save him, She demands that he kneel and beg for his subordinate's life. The two stare at each other in tense silence, measuring each other's intentions. To everyone's surprise, Jung sighs and begins to kneel. Shocked, Hei-cheran wonders if he is really going to kneel for a mere guard. At that moment, the scene focuses on the young man, who is about to touch the ground with his knees. Suddenly, his expression changes, revealing his true intention. With a quick movement, he grabs the knife from the ground and charges at her. Then the boy leaps with the blade in hand in a direct attack. With a smile, the assassin celebrates, saying she knew he wouldn't kneel for a loser. Suddenly, she realizes he is looking elsewhere and wonders what the real target is. Soon after, a dark presence manifests, with hands emerging from the ground around her. One of the hands slowly approaches the assassin's head. Meanwhile, the others grip her leg tightly, immobilizing her. Then the hand finally touches her head, revealing its claws. At that moment, the spirit of Blue Spirit fully reveals itself, enveloping the woman in its energy. The force of the impact throws both Hei-cheran and the guard to the ground. Confused, she gets up and wonders what just happened. Soon, she looks around and realizes that there is nothing in the place. The spirit then explains that it knew that, being from the peak realm, she would sense its aura and dodge the attack. However, the assassin questions him, asking if he is forgetting something. At that moment, Jang throws the knife, which hits her weapon squarely, disarming her. Then he kicks both of them, pushing them apart. With that, he welcomes guard Go-chan back, who reacts startled by what happened. Completely shocked, the woman wonders what is going on. She soon realizes she was saved but does not understand what is happening. The sensation of a strange energy behind her makes her question what kind of trick this is. Despite the distraction, she notices that the real threat is the knife he is holding. With a smile, she concludes that he is weak. She then decides to end this quickly, before he tries something strange again. With determination, she charges for the attack, declaring that she will kill him. Suddenly, she pulls out a new weapon, and the guard stares at her in horror. Go-chan recognizes the object and is left speechless. He then identifies the weapon as the Extreme Execution Needle, the supreme weapon of the sect. With a grim smile, Jeng warns him that this was not a smart move. With a scream, Hei-cheran charges forward and attacks, shouting that he is wrong. Jeng then uses the attachment ritual, aware that the weapon was made to annihilate even the most experienced martial artist in a single blow. Suddenly, both the boy and Blue Spirit react with surprise at what is happening. With that, he realizes he cannot move as the weapon advances toward him. The assassin then reveals that the weapon was made to pierce internal energy, being unaffected by it. Terrified, the entity screams, calling him mortal. With a furious shout, the woman orders him to die. The needle continues its advance, about to hit the boy directly. At the last second, the guard throws himself in front to protect him from the attack. He watches the scene with a completely shocked expression. Blue Spirit also looks on, utterly surprised by the sacrifice. The assassin stands frozen, unable to believe what just happened. The impact of the blow is direct, leaving Go-chan gravely injured. The guard screams with the impact, pushing the boy away protectively. Still in shock, Jeng can only call out the name of guard Go-chan, unable to believe what he saw. At that moment, Jeng's expression changes completely, revealing bright eyes. Thus, the boy shouts the name of Blue Spirit, invoking her in the midst of battle. Irritated, the assassin curses as she tries to defend herself from the counterattack that arises. Then he initiates what he calls the annexation ritual to deal with the situation. With that, the needles launched by the opponent hit him, leaving terrible marks on his hand. Soon after, Hei-cheran expresses total surprise at seeing that he managed to catch her attack. A voice then explains that this is the reason as red hands begin to envelop the assassin. Completely immobilized, the girl screams desperately as she is dominated by the technique. Blue Spirit then states that she should have been defeated while still being kind. Not understanding, the woman asks what is happening, knowing that everything is invisible to her. Jeng simply replies that he had already warned her about the consequences. The boy now watches her immobilized by the hands. He then completes his reasoning, saying that this was a bad move on her part. Immediately, several red hands emerge and completely cover the girl's body. The attack leaves her completely incapacitated, her body paralyzed and unresponsive. After the battle, the young man observes the defeated assassin in front of him. He then walks over to Go-chan, who is on the ground, gravely injured. Without saying a word, he kneels beside him, visibly worried. Then, in a low voice, he calls out the name, Guard Go-chan. Still in silence, he only observes the terrible condition of his companion. With difficulty, the man laments, saying he thought they would work together longer. Confused, the boy asks why he did that. The guard then explains that he needed to fulfill his duty. He continues, saying he could not betray someone who tried to protect him. With his last strength, he reveals that Jeng was the only one. He confesses that, after a life of being abandoned, he finally found someone who did not leave him. Because of that, he states that he was happy in that final moment. Kneeling beside the body, The young man remains silent for a moment. Suddenly, a voice approaches from behind and asks if the guard is dead. The question comes from the assassin, who is now standing with a completely different posture. In a low voice, he accuses her, saying that she devoured him. The entity, now in the woman's body, confirms that yes and says it was not bad, as she loves young and beautiful bodies. She seems satisfied with her new body, admiring the acquisition. Soon after, the entity becomes irritated, complaining that this body will not last long either. With a glance at the guard, she laments that it is a shame, as he should not have died that way. She continues, explaining that since he did not become a vengeful spirit, he must have died satisfied and without regret. Zheng remains silent, with his gaze down and serious. Then the boy begins to explain that, according to the spirit summoning technique, there is another way. Not understanding, the entity in the assassin's body asks what he means. He explains that vengeful spirits are born from hatred, but can also arise when one dies in a place filled with death energy and regret. Zheng continues, saying that since his own energy core is made of death ki, he can intervene. With that, the boy asserts that he is sure he can turn the guard into a vengeful spirit if he uses his death ki. While the entity doubts that it would work, Zheng begins the ritual over the fallen body. With his hands in position, he recites the words of the spell, asking for help from the fruits of Buddha's teachings. He continues the invocation, asking that this become the symbol of his spiritual discipline and the cultivation of his mind. Immediately, an energy begins to shine intensely in the chest of the wounded. The light pulses from the river of the dead, where all things are interconnected. With this, Zheng commands the spirit to detach from the body and step back onto the earth. Soon, a small sphere of energy emerges and floats in the air. Surprised by the result, the entity in the assassin's body asks if the ritual is complete. She then realizes that since the boy used his own key of death, he brought the spirit back as a familiar. The entity warns that the newly formed energy is very weak and may disappear at any moment, as there is no vessel. Upon hearing this, he responds only with a "so." The entity agrees that they need to find one, but wonders where they could find a vessel. Her speech is interrupted mid-sentence when she perceives the boy's intention. Completely terrified, the girl stammers, asking what he is doing. Meanwhile, Go Chan's consciousness floats in the void, wondering if he is dead. He feels his essence draining away and laments being so powerless. The man questions why he did that and why he tried so hard. Soon he hears a voice calling his name and thinks that, after all, it wasn't so bad. Surprised, he wonders if he just heard Zheng's voice. Suddenly, the call echoes loudly. Guard Go Chan. Now in the assassin's body, he asks in shock how he is still alive, and the boy asks him to listen carefully. Zheng explains that he used his key of death to bind the soul to this world, transforming it into a familiar spirit. He continues, saying that even so, the energy was weak and at risk of disappearing, leaving the other even more confused. He states that he had no choice but to place it in the first available body. The young man explains that there was only one extra body in the room. Then he reveals that for this reason, he had to put him in the body of the assassin. Shocked, the guard touches the new form, unable to believe what he heard. Totally desperate, Go Chan screams, asking what the hell happened. As soon as dawn breaks, a desperate scream echoes through the room, pleading to be freed. Go Chan, in panic, asks the young master to switch his body, as being a woman is too much for him. While trying to move a door, Zheng explains that he will disappear if he leaves, and that a new vessel would require another death. The guard then realizes that he is completely trapped, as on top of everything, he would have to face the Flying Death School. Suddenly, a mysterious voice advises him to be content, making him ask who is there. Soon, the blue spirit reveals itself in its ghostly form, causing the newly transformed one to scream in terror. It states that, even without knowing who she is, now as a ghost, he can feel the difference in power between them. Still in shock, he reflects on the immense disparity of status that separates them. This realization is so intense that it gives him a terrible vision with the imposing presence of the entity. He then looks at Zheng and wonders what kind of boy he is to be beside such a being all the time. The spirit questions him about his expression, saying he should be grateful, but he only complains that he is a man. She reprimands him for thinking like a mortal, stating that he should be happy for having ascended in rank. With that, the young voice suggests they confirm this theory, leaving the other frightened. Immediately, Zheng's foot advances towards him. Then, Go Chan quickly manages to dodge the attack. Upon landing with surprising agility, he asks what happened, while the boy comments that he has certainly changed. The guard then realizes that this was not a movement of his own, but something that only an ascending master could perform. The blue spirit asks if he is satisfied now, but the embarrassed one insists that he is still a man. Zheng then asks them to be content for now, promising to transfer him when he has the opportunity. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaches from outside the room. A voice calls for the young master, identifying itself as Ba Qian from the inner chamber. Soon after, the man opens the door and announces excitedly that he has good news. Zheng asks what happened, and the visitor reveals that the hall master has finally awakened. The news leaves everyone in the room completely surprised and silent. Meanwhile, on a distant mountain, the Taoist Master Gu observes the residents. Through the memories of another master, he identifies the location as the Hall of the Wooden Sword, where resides the one who challenged his pavilion. He then realizes that this is certainly not an ordinary job. A massive dark energy envelops the place, which he recognizes as the domain of the ghost's will. The master laments that, by merely trying to observe, he has witnessed the formation of a storm-like barrier. He wonders what to do, as he would be caught if he approached, but soon notices something different. Using a technique, the Taoist master observes from a distance what happens inside the courtyard of the residence. Elsewhere on the premises, a guard informs young master Mok Young-ho that they need to leave, while the young man insists he is not drunk. The guard then informs him that the other young masters are gathering because the master of the hall has awakened. Upon witnessing the scene, the observer realizes that all the sons will soon be gathered. Immediately, he understands that this is his great chance to act. He plans to use his familiar to separate the blue spirit from the boy, as he too will have to go see the master of the hall. His goal is to attack Zheng when he is completely alone and vulnerable. Back in the room, the guard calls for the young master, pulling the boy from his thoughts. Jing apologizes, saying he got distracted by the good news and expressing relief. In his thoughts, he laments that this is a problem, as the awakening of the master of the hall disrupts his plans to go train. The guard then informs him that the master of the hall has requested all the young masters to be brought, and the boy agrees to go. Turning back, he asks the Go Che-rin escort to clean up all the mess left behind. Surprised by the new name, the spirit in the female body simply agrees to the order before Zheng leaves the room. As soon as the boy steps out to find his father, the blue spirit silently follows him. Alone in the room, Go Chan finally lets out a long sigh of relief. Looking at his old body, he laments having to clean up his own corpse, questioning how far his life has fallen. He then wonders how he ended up in that body, and what the two major problems he now faces are. His face turns red as he thinks about the embarrassing situation. After checking to see if he is alone, he prepares to change clothes. The guard decides he cannot wear those robes in the hall and should don an escort uniform. Unbeknownst to him, the blue spirit watches him with a mischievous smile. As he turns around, he sees the entity standing there silently. With a terrified look, he laments that he wants to die, but remembers that he is already dead. Outside, Zheng asks the spirit where she was, and she replies that she was just watching an idiot. Suddenly, the boy stops upon seeing someone familiar in front of him. At that moment, Mok Yuqian runs toward him, shouting his name. The blue spirit comments that he somehow survived, and the boy agrees. She then observes that, although his skin has become strange, at least he did not fall into key deviation due to the false technique. As he approaches, Zheng greets him, but the other young man interrupts and tells him to cut the conversation. In a low voice, the fourth brother asks if he tried to master the secret, requesting that he not speak about it and just answer. With a smile, the boy asks if there was a problem, while the entity calls him a poor thing. Mok Yuqian then questions him, asking why he is fine if he should have also tried the technique. The young master falls into despair, finding it impossible that his understanding is inferior to that of his companion. As the spirit thinks about the wickedness of the situation, she suddenly notices something approaching. With seriousness, she states that the invader has finally arrived, leaving Zheng confused. She then comments with a smile about the boldness of the person. The entity questions how someone dares to enter her domain of the ghost's will. Zheng then realizes that it seems someone from the phantasmagoric spirit pavilion has arrived at the location. With that, the spirit warns that she is already leaving, turning to depart. The young master questions her about why she is laughing, but she brushes it off and does not reveal the reason. Mok Yuqian insists on knowing what happened, but the boy refuses to explain. Upon arriving in the meeting room, the fourth brother irritably notices that Zheng actually did not even try to use the technique. As soon as they enter, the second brother contemptuously asks why the two are arriving together. Mrs. Seok scolds her eldest son, telling him to be quiet and not say a word because of his smell of alcohol. Beside her, the second brother observes the scene, thinking about how pathetic the eldest is. He then wonders if their father called them to discuss that matter. Soon, the woman concludes that there can only be one reason for the meeting: the decision of the heir. The fourth young man claims that he does not care about the books, as everything will be resolved when he becomes the heir. In silence, Zheng reflects that he can finally feel his father's powerful energy. A guard then announces to the master of the hall that all the young masters have gathered outside. From inside the room, an imposing voice simply orders them to enter. Then all the sons bow together and offer their respectful greetings. Zheng also offers his formal greetings while observing the man who is his father. Before them, the master of the hall, Mok In-dan, silently watches the four sons. The patriarch then says that it is good that everyone has come to welcome him. In the presence of the patriarch's imposing figure, All the sons remain silent. Thus, Zheng understands that the other's concern was not merely out of greed, but something deeper. He soon realizes that what unites everyone there is the fear of their own father. The boy finds it surprising that, even surrounded by murderous energy, the man before them does not convey any fragility. In this way, he recognizes that he is truly in the presence of the master of the mansion, Makin Dan. In silence, he continues his analysis of the situation. This observation leads him to question the true nature of his father. He wonders who or what brought that dark energy to the place. Meanwhile, far from there, at the residence of the martial artists of the outer hall, Master Taoist Gu breaks an artifact in his hands and begins to reflect, trying to understand the recent events. He soon asks if what they are saying is that the patriarch awakened because of the murderous energy. Still in disbelief, he questions how such a feat could have been possible. Then, a voice manifests, revealing that it heard the sounds of Gu Dio earlier, catching the Taoist by surprise. With a laugh, the burly man asserts that a shaman must have intervened and freed the leader of the mansion. Therefore, he declares that the path is simple. He himself will have to finish the job. At that moment, the warrior remembers something as he approaches the unconscious guard. With a cruel smile, he asks if the man had a good nap. At the same instant, the guard screams in despair upon realizing he has been caught. Soon after, he is brutally eliminated by a devastating blow. The attacker then throws a body outside. In the darkness, several pairs of bright eyes open. Wielding his weapon, the man orders everyone to advance. Thus, his dark army begins to march toward the mock sword mansion. Meanwhile, back in the room, the four brothers remain silent before the patriarch. Finally, the master of the hall breaks the silence and begins to speak. With his imposing voice, he asks if they know why they have been summoned there. None of the heirs respond, remaining silent with tense expressions. Soon Zheng decides to speak up and asks if the meeting is not to choose the successor. The direct question surprises the others, while the patriarch stares at him speechless. The master of the mansion then reflects that the son has indeed changed and wonders if the master of the inner hall was right. Amid a memory, the patriarch questions whether it was really the boy who saved him. The guard confirms, explaining that he apparently was the one who stopped the craze and possessed shaman. At that moment, the master remembers having thought that it was all just coincidence, or perhaps a lie to seize power. Still, he continues with his analysis, recalling how, in the past, the son wouldn't even lift his head and now showed no signs of nervousness. In light of this, he decides that he will need to confirm with his own eyes, and declares that he will test them personally. While explaining that the goal is to verify if they are qualified for the position, the youngest interrupts to apologize. He then firmly states that he would like to decline participation in the test. The unexpected refusal leaves everyone surprised, and the patriarch questions whether he really does not wish to be tested. Upon hearing the confirmation, the second brother smiles, commenting that this makes things much easier for him. With seriousness, the master looks at him again and asks the reason for his decision. With his gaze directed at the ground, the young man replies that he feels he is not good enough. Even so, the father insists on understanding the real reason, and he reaffirms that he does not consider himself qualified. The patriarch observes him in silence, absorbing the response. The boy then continues, explaining that he is at a disadvantage in many aspects compared to his brothers, whether they are younger or older. He argues that it is natural for someone talented to assume the position, but that he does not fit that profile. Finally, he concludes that, since he does not see himself as worthy, he wishes to forego the title of master of the mansion. Upon hearing the entire explanation, the man in front begins to laugh softly. However, within a few seconds, the suppressed laughter transforms into a loud guffaw, leaving the son confused. The patriarch then regains control and says that he now understands the situation. In his thoughts, he acknowledges that the young man has truly changed, as there is no longer arrogance or greed in him. He remembers how presumptuous his son used to be and reflects on the change, noting that now he relinquishes power for the good of the mansion. Thus, he thinks it is always good to see a child mature and concludes that, yes, he is definitely qualified. After pondering, the man turns back to the young man and asks why he believes he is not good enough. The question, as direct as it is unexpected, leaves the other sons completely shocked. Then, the patriarch continues, stating that everyone must have understood well what they heard. He reveals that, days ago, he was ambushed and lost an arm during the attack. The father then clarifies that his life was in real danger, and that it was precisely the most unlikely son who saved him. Thus, he recalls that it was he himself who said that the successor should be someone capable of accomplishing something grand. The master concludes by saying that saving his life certainly fits that description. Upon hearing this, the second brother realizes that, although he had heard about the incident, he never imagined it was something so serious. Meanwhile, the mentioned boy remains silent, immersed in his own thoughts. Suddenly, a memory of a burning village invades his mind. In the midst of the fire, he remembers the reason he remained silent that day. He recalls observing his grandfather's body, fallen amidst the chaos. At that moment, all he could do was stare at the lifeless man lying on the ground. Then he realizes that the mark on the body of the master of the hall is identical. It is the same mark that was on the note found with his grandfather. He remembers that mark glowing on his chest right after his death. Moreover, he recalls that it was the same as the one he saw on the doppelganger found lying down. Finally, he remembers that the same mark was left on his own chest during the attack. The sight of that burning mark connects all the pieces in his mind. With this, a cruel smile emerges on his face as he realizes he has finally found his true target, revealing a completely terrifying expression. Suddenly, the young man's expression shifts from a smile to a complete state of attention. Soon after, the master of the outer hall begins to assert that he also has a right to something. However, before he can finish the sentence, he interrupts himself upon noticing strange movement, asking what is happening. With wide eyes, the patriarch loudly questions what is occurring outside. Following this, a subordinate rushes in to inform that there is a problem. Right behind him, a guard is brutally injured by a killer with bright eyes. As chaos takes over outside, a scream echoes confirming that it is an ambush. Because of this, one of the captains orders his men to contain the invaders and protect the gates until the master arrives. The masked assassin swiftly advances, eliminating everyone who tries to block him. With disdain, the man with the large sword observes the bodies sprawled on the ground. Shortly after, he turns to the entrance and declares that that gate is completely useless. With a single blow of his massive sword, he destroys the entire entrance to the hall. As he crosses the debris, he orders his allies to begin the search. With a fixed gaze, he completes the order, demanding that they find the thing. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the reflection of a shaman observes the invasion without saying a word. Amidst the confusion, the ethereal figure wonders what is really happening. The mystic soon laments that, given the situation, it will be impossible to neutralize Ma Kyungwon as he had planned. However, while performing a seal, he tries to console himself with the fact that he will not be noticed under his disguise. Nevertheless, he is suddenly immobilized by another man, surprised to recognize that this is also shamanism. Then, the aggressor issues a decree ordering his spiritual eye to undo the target's spell. With this, the illusion of the disguised one shatters, revealing that he has been completely discovered. Grabbing him by the collar, the other man stares at him and directly asks if he was responsible. With a hand tightening around his neck, the aggressor accuses him of being the shaman who tried to attack the master of the mansion. Despite trying to defend himself, claiming a misunderstanding, the opponent had already recognized him. Coldly, the assassin questions him about how he dares to interfere in the actions of the underworld assassin's pavilion. Upon hearing such a name, the shaman is silenced definitively by his captor. At that moment, the leader of the invasion turns to the assassin and demands to know what he is doing, receiving only extermination as a response. Even so, the commander of the operation says that finding the thing is the priority, and the other agrees while holding a talisman. High atop a rooftop, the master of the mansion observes the destruction and is indignant at the audacity of the invaders. Soon after, he challenges aloud anyone who dares to invade his home, warning that they must be ready to die. With a powerful war cry, he leaps into battle, inspiring his sons to protect him and fight for the mansion. Taking advantage of the chaos, the young Zhang decides to follow his own path. He then realizes that, amidst so much chaos, no one would notice the disappearance of a single person. However, the memory of the mark on the chest of the master of the outer hall makes him hesitate for a moment. With that, he questions whether he should help since he did not have the chance to ask his questions. Suddenly, a dark energy begins to manifest in his hand as he senses a presence. Right behind him, an assassin leaps from the shadows to attack him with a sword in hand. Without even turning around, the young man stops the blow with his hand, completely surprising the attacker. He then confirms his suspicions as the enemy falls defeated by that strange energy. Nearby, everyone fights desperately to survive amidst the battle cries. Zhang merely observes the fallen body at his feet and the mansion being consumed by flames. Finally, he reflects on the satisfaction he feels with the despair and suffering generated by so many losses. Observing the energy in his hand, he recognizes it as the pure key of death. With a satisfied smile, he states that the place is overflowing with energy and wishes to absorb it completely. However, he soon realizes that it would be too dangerous to try to circulate his Kai in a place like that. Suddenly, Go-chan runs towards him and asks, worried, if the young master is okay. Out of breath, she tries to explain that she was changing clothes when a group of strange people invaded the place. Ignoring the explanation, he merely comments that she arrived at a good time. He then crouches down and asks the young woman to protect him for a moment, as he will circulate his Kai. Shocked, she begins to shout that he cannot do that here, but is interrupted by the attack of an assassin. Even reluctantly, Go-chan finds herself forced to block the enemy's blow to protect the boy. Already in meditation, the cultivator merely confirms that the process has begun as expected. He then reflects on how the key of death created by dozens of losses is pure and full of emotions. As he absorbs the energy, he calculates that it is double what he obtained from that beast, but soon corrects himself. With a smile, he realizes that, in fact, the energy is 3 times more powerful. While fighting, the young warrior complains that there are too many enemies and wonders where the terrifying ghostly woman is to help. As soon as she finishes speaking, she turns and freezes upon seeing the master of the outer hall, Sang-won back, right there. With a thread of hope, Go-chan remembers that the young master has another spirit familiar and questions whether he would be the demonic monk, pleading for help. Confused by his pause, she merely repeats softly the words demonic monk. Then her expression becomes dark and inscrutable as she analyzes the scene before her. Soon, a subtle smile emerges after opening the demonic monk and finding it interesting. The assassin then observes the boy and reflects on how he dares to circulate his ki amidst a war against a mysterious enemy. Meanwhile, Go-chan puts herself on the defensive and concludes that there is no way to defeat that man. With her body trembling, she realizes that her instincts alert her that the man before her is incomprehensible and overwhelmingly powerful. Observing the scene from afar, the leader of the invaders also smiles and finds all of this very interesting.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.